Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. You have one new friend request. I don't know when Facebook introduced the feature. Friend suggestions, it used to be called, but now it's people you may know. A bunch of Facebook profiles suggested to you to add as friends. Usually people who have a mutual friend with you or someone you've searched for in the past. What creeps me out is how accurate it is. It's clearly taking data from somewhere because it suggested people to me that I've only ever interacted with in real life. The woman that cuts my hair, or the guy who does my taxes at H&R Block. Sometimes, though, it really is a random person that Facebook thinks I know for some reason. That's what happened on Thursday evening. A new friend suggestion. A.R. Winters. No mutual friends, no apparent connection to me. But this one caught my eye for a few reasons. First, the photo was of poor quality. It looked like a photo from the 90s. Something that had been developed on real film, and then scanned or photographed. Second, it had been taken from far away. The man, or possibly woman, was wearing dark clothing, standing against a tree, so far away I couldn't make out their face. It didn't occur to me until just then, but generally, profile pictures aren't taken from that far away, unless they're traveling and showing off some landmark. But this person was just leaning against a dead tree. Out of curiosity, I clicked their profile. All their info was hidden, though. No cover picture, no other profile pictures, no about me info. The next time I loaded Facebook, he wasn't a suggested friend anymore. It was just the usual, never-ending wheel of 30-something women that had a smattering of mutual friends with me. So I forgot about it for a few days, until they popped up again. People you may know. A.R. Winters. The same photo of them leaning against a dead tree. Or was it? As I stared at the photo, I realized they were standing straight up, no longer leaning. I could have sworn. I shook my head. They were so far away. How could I tell whether they were leaning on the tree or just standing underneath it? Later that night, I checked Facebook again. People you may know. A.R. Winters. One mutual friend. I froze. A mutual friend? The mutual friend was some girl I went to high school with. I didn't know her well. We'd been close in the 8th grade, but then she started hanging out with the more popular girls and we lost touch. Still Facebook friends though, because I never went through my list of 2,000 plus people and pruned some off. It didn't say he had a mutual friend with her before, so they just became Facebook friends. Like today, this evening. Maybe there's someone from our school. Maybe they just joined Facebook for the first time, now. Or maybe they lost the password to their old account and are creating a new one. A few more days passed and I didn't see A.R. Winters show up in my feed. But then, on Saturday night, there they were. People you may know. A.R. Winters. 3 mutual friends. Not 1, 3. And the photo was definitely different. It was still the dead tree, the overcast sky. Everything looked exactly the same, except the person. They weren't against a tree anymore. They'd taken a few steps closer to the photographer. They appeared to be a woman, tall and pale, dressed in a flowy black shirt and long black pants. Wavy, long dark hair parted neatly on the left side. Because of the film quality, I still couldn't make out her face. Who is she? I glanced at our mutual friends. One was a guy I had chemistry lab with in college, and the other was our English teacher, Mrs. Flowers. She'd been the teacher mentor of our literature club, and she'd been dead for 5 years. I sat there, staring at the screen, all of it slowly sinking in. Her account can't even accept new friend requests. And why would this random person friend request her anyway? A horrible, creeping dread tugged at the back of my mind. I clicked on the 2 other mutual friends. Jessica Marie and Michael scrolled down their timelines, and oh fuck, they'd also pass away. There hadn't been any official announcement for either, but their timelines were scattered with messages like, I miss you and 2 years since you've been here. Quick Google searches showed that Jessica Marie died in 2020 from complications of COVID, and Michael had died in 2023 in a motorcycle accident. I clicked back to my feed, to the friend's suggestions, to ARS profile. I froze. She was standing closer, much closer. Her face was pale, almost pure white, like all the blood had been sucked out of it. Her eyes were dark, pupil and iris indistinguishable, and they seemed too big for her eyes. She had no eyebrows. Her long, dark hair twisted around her, as if there was a terrible wind. Blip, I jumped. There was a little red, one over the bell icon. A. R. Winter sent you a friend request. My hands began to shake. I stared at the 2 buttons. Confirm. Cancel. I clicked cancel. Closed out the window. Slammed the laptop shut. I sat there in the dark, panting. Sweat covered my arms. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Calm down. It's obviously just some stupid prank. The photo's probably not even real. AI. I pushed out a breath and got up, put on my hoodie, left the apartment and went for a walk. I shoved my hands in my pockets and walked along the walking trail at the local park. My breath came out in clouds of mist. I shivered. It was almost dusk and the street lamps glowed across the road, orange amber. Then I stopped. I'd never noticed it before. At the edge of the park, there was a big oak tree, barren of leaves now, but it looked just like the tree in A.R. Winter's photo. A million trees look like that. Stop it. As I stood there, staring, something peeked out from behind it. A pale white face, dark flowy clothing, barely visible in the dying light. But I knew it was her. I knew. I ran back home, locked my apartment door, and opened the laptop. Went to Facebook. Hey! R. Winter sent you a friend request. The profile photo. Her face filled the entire photo, right up against the screen, like she was staring right at me. And maybe it's just the stress, but I feel sick, really sick. I've thrown up twice in the past half hour. My stomach hurts so much, more than I ever remember hurting before, and I can't help but think, am I next? Story 2. There's only one rule to remember if you see the button-hook men. Don't tell a soul they exist. They'll disappear you. And for breaking this rule, I'll soon find out where their victims go. I won't be able to outrun them. After all, they're not really men at all. A button-hook is a handheld aid with a curved hook at one end and a handle at the other. It fastens and unfastens unyielding buttons. That's all. It's not an exciting invention. Not even a particularly well-known one. Certainly not sinister in the slightest. But, you know, even most mundane of tools can do far from mundane things in willful hands. For context, I learned about the immigration officers of Ellis Island in history class. Men who use button hooks to intrusively inspect prospective American citizens for trachoma, a contagious eye disease that resulted in blindness when left untreated. Eyelids were peeled back like fruit skin. A ghastly procedure. These immigration officers became known as the button-hook men, and they were feared by those being processed on the island. That's a horror story in itself, but not the one I'm here to tell. No, this is the story of the unearthly creatures my friends and I came to call the button-hook men. Influenced by our recent history lesson, these creatures have been disappearing people in my hometown, which I'll call Nosleep, for 29 years. Bear in mind that the original button-hook men of Ellis Island were just that, men. And men die. It's ideas that live. Stories. Monsters. Only these aren't the fictional kind. They're real, no matter how much you might want them not to be. And if you think they won't come for you, God save your soul. Because this is bigger than my hometown. None of us will be safe for long. First, they come for someone else. Next, they come for you. Nosleep is a fourth-rate crap heap, and always has been. But our economy really nosedived in the 90s, Of course, my friends and I were too young to understand why. We didn't know or care about austerity, about powerful men who bled the working class, the middle class, and even some of the upper class. It's a confusing thing, the way the world works. That's why most of us simply choose not to study the mechanisms. We only really give a hoot when life becomes expensive, hard, and isn't it the darndest thing that those responsible always make sure we point our fingers at each other? That was what broke Knot Place in 1998, when I was 11 years old, and by the time the button-hook men arrived, it was already too late. Tom, Perry, Julianne, and I called ourselves a Fun Four back then. We looked out for one another. Perry, mostly. She was born in Knot Place, but her mother, Samira, moved here from India in the late 80s. Pregnant, recently widowed, and in catastrophic straits. She upheaved her life to survive, to ensure her soon-to-be-born girl would survive. Perry had a good life. Mostly, she caught a few racist remarks here and there, but the Fun Four looked out for her. The trouble started to brew in '95 with the unveiling of Knot Place Megamart. It quickly drove local shops out of business, and when the supermarket hired Samira, it was easy for Knot Place citizens to blame her, the brown-skinned cashier. Life became scary for them, but fear came for us all on December 20th, 1998. That night, in Perry's bedroom, the Fun Four watched films on a bulky box television. It was a distraction sleepover. See, whilst we were upstairs, Perry's mother was being interrogated by Constable Harrison in the kitchen. Knot Place Police Constable was a nice-mannered man, but a weak one, despite his pleasantries and platitudes. He had no backbone. Case in point, Harrison was following up on a baseless accusation made by Mrs. Bradshaw, whose husband's bakery went under in '97. An accusation that Samira had used falsified information when applying for British citizenship nearly 12 years earlier. That was a lie. What film next? I asked. Perry shrugged. I don't care, Joshua. Anything. Just the tears made their entrance. They're going to make us move to India. Tom frowned. But you're not even from India. Doesn't matter. Mrs. Bradshaw called us foreign muck, and everybody agrees. Well, I don't, Julian said. And my brother told me Mrs. Bradshaw got a Brazilian, but lived a few years earlier. Should we ask the policeman to send that foreign muck back too? Tom and I chuckled, and Perry came close. An hour later, once the constable had finished his interrogation and left, Samira came up to Perry's room. Bedtime now, she said. Then she nodded at Tom and me. You two will go in the spare room. Julianne, you'll sleep in here with Perry. Tom got to his feet. Yes, ma'am. I'm special, Julian whispered to me, and I nudged her in the ribs. Perry began. Mum, what did... Not now, Beatty, her mother said, before nodding more sternly at me. Bedtime, Joshua. It's 9 o'clock. Sorry, I said, getting to my own feet and joining Tom at the door. I turned back before shutting it and smiled softly at Perry. It'll be okay, Paz. She said nothing. Instead, my friend sniffled, burrowed beneath her duvet, and flicked off the bedside lamp. Julianne remained on the carpet in that dimly moonlit room, and she spoke to me with a shrug. I don't know what to do to make all of this better, it said. I returned with a nod because I didn't know either. A still sobbing Samira closed her daughter's door, then led Tom and I across the upstairs landing. As she opened the door to the spare room, I thought of something warm to say, something that might dry her eyes. But before I had a chance, Perry's mother let out a faint croak of horror and shot her arm sideways. She was bracing Tom and me from something ahead, something in the blackness of her bedroom doorway at the end of the corridor. It was black unlike any other black. I don't know how else to put it. Just as I don't know whether I turned cold as a result of Samira's sudden movement or as a result of being eyed by that doorway's colorless cavity. Whatever the case, I fear it more than anything else in the world. What's wrong, ma'am? Was Tom's timid question. Samira stood still and answered with a shake of her head, but she did not twist to face us. I didn't like that, and the longer we stood there, staring into that dark doorframe, the more assured I became that something is staring back at us. Ma'am, Tom pressed, tugging on Samira's sleeve to get a response. What's in? "There's nothing in the doorway, Thomas," she said before he finished the question. Then, as Samira started to shepherd us into the spare room, I glimpsed something, a silver curl glinting from the black of the doorway. I thought I'd imagined it, but as Perry's mother closed the door on Tom and me, I heard him whisper, "But no." I knew exactly what Tom was referencing. Ellis Island, the button-hook man. But he had to be wrong, I decided. It was a trick of the light. "It was a button-hook man," Tom said, "from the photos Mr. Langton showed us." I shook my head. "No, shut up. It wasn't anything. It was..." "Go to bed, boys," Samira said from the other side of the door, "and do not leave this room." There followed creaks of floorboards as Perry's mother crept along the hallway towards her bedroom. And then nothing, not the sound of Samira shutting her bedroom door. Just nothing. No noise at all. "What's going on?" Tom said. "Don't." I warned fruitlessly, knowing my friend too well, but he had already pushed down the handle and opened the bedroom door. Tom was the smartest of Fun Four, but stupidly brave. He had no survival instincts. I begrudgingly chased him onto the upstairs landing, and we stopped in the glow of the orange light overhead. We eyeballed the black of Samira's bedroom. On the carpet before that threshold were her fluffy white slippers and red droplets. "W, what is that?" I whimpered, knowing full well that it was blood. "Something's happened to her," Tom said. "We need to do something. We need to tell someone." The moment he uttered that final word, there sounded a dissonant clink from Samira's room. Tom looked at me, ready to do something and tell someone, and I merely whimpered with great dread as I looked over his shoulder at the doorway. The dark from within was spreading without. It gushed out of the doorframe and towards us, a black stream through a ravine of white walls. "There's nothing in the doorway," Samira had promised. Well, I'd known that was a lie. Known Tom was right. We hadn't imagined the glint of silver. As the darkness engulfed us, nearly entirely extinguishing the light above, Tom turned on his heel. The two of us faced the black of the doorway, faced a figure emerging from it. It was a man, much as the silver tip of his appendage wasn't a button hook, or a hand, or anything remotely of our world. But I needed a frame of reference to stop my terrified mind from unraveling entirely. So I accepted Tom's name. This was a button-hook man, like the ones from Ellis Island. The thing was cloaked in shade which sloshed from its black portal, and nearly drowned the light bulb entirely. I was glad of that. What I could see was already too much. This bipedal thing, with limbs tapering off into keen silver tips, each bearing a slight curve, may have had a face, a mouth, eyes, but maybe not. I tried not to look too closely. Tried only to drag Tom back into the bedroom. He resisted, of course. "Where is she?" my friend asked. The button-hook man answered by wrapping bladed limbs like a noose around Tom's neck and hoisting the boy into the air. "Don't kill me," he wailed. The creature obliged. It uncoiled one of its silvery extremities from Tom's throat, then surgically jabbed at his eyes. My friend screeched louder as the button-hook man blinded him, and I screeched selfishly, as I presumed myself to be next. When the creature finished plucking out Tom's eyes, I prayed a silent prayer for it to be over, for the inhuman thing to slink back into the shadows. But the button-hook man put its silver appendage to work again, this time driving a hook up Tom's nostril and having a riddle fishing deeply up into my friend's head. What horrified me most was that Tom's moans of terror quickly devolved, became moans of confusion, moans of vegetative nothingness. And then the button-hook man removed its pointed limb to reveal what must have been gray matter from Tom's skull. My once wise, though admittedly foolhardy, friend had been rendered a lobotomized husk. He presumably shuffled past me, down the stairs and out of the door. But the terrible truth is that I don't remember. I was in shock, near catatonic. I don't remember what became of him. I don't know where he went. I know only that he's not been seen since that day in 1998, because I wasn't registering anything. I was thinking only, run. I have to run, which the button-hook man proved to be true as it slashed the silver limb in my way. The thing lacerated my forearm, drawing a gash from my wrist up to my elbow and an agonized yelp from my core. The The scar stays with me to this day. The feeling of that cold appendage icing not only the flesh and the bone below, but my very heart. It felt, for a moment, as if I had been changed not only physically but emotionally, as if I had become a husk of a person, blind to empathy, blind to any human thought or feeling. Pulling back on the lurching creature, I gunned for Perry's room, tore open her door, and slammed it behind me. As pounding came from the other side, I turned to find myself in another moonlit space bearing an unfolding scene of horror. Perry was lying in bed, screaming up at the face of another button-hook man towering above her, Silver reaching towards her, speaking the unspoken threat of disappearance, sending her wherever her mother had been sent. Julianne was sitting on the carpet with arms around her legs. She rocked back and forth, watched helplessly as Perry seemed poised to meet her end at the hooks of the creature from the black. It says, my mom is, she's, Perry didn't finish any of her sentences. Julianne crawled over the floor towards me and tugged at my hand. We need to go. I nodded and looked at the button-hook man, whose attention had shot to Julianne and me, the two loose ends threatening to escape. With that, I understood this creature. Well, of course, I didn't understand it. It was a horror from another world, one I wouldn't possibly ever hope to understand. But I understood Tom's fatal flaw. He had threatened to tattle. Please just let us leave with her. I begged the button-hook man, we won't tell a soul what we saw. I promise. I don't know whether it understood me. Don't know whether it even spoke our language. But I do know that the man observed me for a second, recognized my cowardice, recognized that I was telling the truth. In that moment, I truly intended to never tell a soul, a promise I've only broken now, after nearly 3 decades. The bedroom light burst to life, and the button-hook men vanished with the dark. But the fun for survived that night in body only. Tom never showed up, no matter how hard the police searched. Perry ended up in a psychiatric ward, fractured by both the disappearance of her mother and what experts call delusions of button-hook men. My cousin, Wesley, still lives in Knott Place. He says Julianne's a town drunk these days. She works as a plumber, and a damn bad one. As for me, I've lived overseas for 20 years, and I've teetered on being committed to psychiatric wards myself. Who would believe my story? Who would believe the supernatural things I saw that night? Well, people in Knott Place, apparently. I've heard things over the years. Stories from Wesley, disappearances of other citizens, strange sightings in dark doorways, unearthly things. I didn't used to care. Knott Place was on the other side of the world from me. But now it's happening everywhere. People are going missing. That's why I'm sharing my story here. You see, I've been seeing them again. In doorways, in the shade, glints of silver, outlines of things far from men. They're not upholding the deal. So what's the use in keeping hush anymore? What's the use in keeping my promise? The button-hook men are coming for us all. I realized that yesterday when my elderly neighbor, a sweet French lady named Susie, said familiar words over coffee. There's nothing in the doorway. My heart seized in fear, much as it did back in '98, but not as sharply as it did this morning. Susie has disappeared. They're not just in Knott Place. Maybe they never were. So, I'm currently about to board a flight back to my hometown, back to see Wesley and make heads and tails of his horror, before it makes me disappear too, before I find out where those people went. I don't think I want to know. Story 3. I watched a secluded ranch house a weekend. When it got dark, it got weird. It was a still, cold night in January. To be exact, Monday, January 20th, 2025. I was house sitting. It was an older home, not ancient by any means, but old. One of those ranch houses that rest in the fields and the outskirts of a small rural town. The house sat at the end of a long dirt road, enclosed by miles of fields. It was a peaceful place. No streetlights, no cars, only stars and the quiet electrical hum of the porch light. My job was simple. There were 6 dogs, 7 if you included mine, and a pen with some horses on the far side of the yard. I had to feed and water them, of course, and also make sure the dogs stayed out of neighboring properties. They were free range, and with so many fields to explore, they were living the best life a dog could live. But when dusk came, I had to round them up. Across the yard from the house stood an old wooden barn, and in that barn was a cattle trailer full of straw. That was where the dogs would be locked up at night. It sounded simple enough, but with 7 dogs on a property of who knows how many acres, it wasn't the easiest task. I had just finished my dinner when I decided I'd better look for them. I'd been scrolling on my phone for some time, and when my attention finally left the screen, the house was much darker than I realized. I put on my boots, opened the screen door, and headed out into the cold evening air. The sun had just set and was shedding the last of its light on the nearby mountaintops. The tallest peak glowed pink and orange along with the clouds above. It looked beautiful, piercing the sky across the endless sea of farmland. To tell the truth, I was staring off at the scene for some time before the silence was broken by a distant howl. With one howl came another, and soon a whole pack of coyotes filled the air with their mournful cries. I knew then I'd best get those dogs. It didn't take much calling before rounding up most of them. My dog answered my calls first, running enthusiastically across the yard, then another and another. Soon I had all but Lewis. That's when I heard, across the field behind the barn, distant howls turned to growls, and then the growls became shrieks. With fingers crossed, praying that it was a coyote dying and not Lewis, I hopped into my truck. Quickly I swung open the old metal gate behind the barn and headed down the ditch bank. By that time, the sky's light had faded, and all that could be seen was the 2 square feet of ground my headlights kept lit. I was beginning to feel a little spooked. As I looked the best I could at what little I could see, I listened for more howls. I couldn't hear much more than the squeaky timing belt. After a few more minutes of driving and calling out Lewis, I headed back to the house feeling defeated. If that dumb dog died on my watch, it wouldn't be long before I'd have lost that job, let alone get paid. But against all odds, the stupid mutt was sitting by the barn door, innocently wagging his tail when I pulled the truck back in the yard. Relieved, I opened the door and threw him in the cattle trailer. Then, in the dull light of my flashlight, I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then again to ensure I had done my job. They were all there, squinting up at my light with curious eyes. I locked the trailer door, went out of the barn, and headed across the yard for the house. It was getting late by then, and I was ready to call it a day, so I took off my boots and shirt and jumped in bed. Little did I know, the night was not over. After a few minutes of doom scrolling, I decided I'd better set my alarm and call it a day. I checked the time as I placed my phone down for the night, 10:47 p.m. Not bad compared to the last few nights. I get a good 7 hours of sleep, or so I thought. I had just begun to drift off when I heard again. A distant howl pierced the silence, followed by another, and soon all the dogs in the trailer joined the choir of dimwit K9S. Annoyed, I began to wonder if I had really gotten all the dogs rounded up. I did count them twice, so they must all be there. But did I close the gate behind the barn? I couldn't remember. I had to go make sure. Reluctantly, I got back out of bed, put on my coat and boots, and headed out the door. They had stopped their howling when I stepped outside. It was only the porch light's lonely electric hum that accompanied the sound of my footsteps. With heavy eyelids, I walked toward the barn when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head to see a man on the far side of the yard, walking the opposite direction of me. Startled, I stopped and turned my attention to him. In an almost mirror-like fashion, he did the same. As my eyes focused on him, I realized he wasn't just some random guy. He was me. Confused, I took a step toward the barn. At the same time, he took a step toward the house. I was so startled, I woke up in a cold sweat. Guess I had gotten some sleep after all. Sleep with some acid trip dreams. It took me a minute to settle down again, but after scrolling on Instagram for some time, I began to feel tired, and so I went back to sleep. It wasn't until what felt like a couple of hours later that I woke up again to the irritating howls of the coyotes and cattle dogs. What is their problem? Why at 5 in the morning? I thought to myself in anger. I grabbed my phone and checked the time, and after reading it once, I had to turn it off and check again. It read 10:47 p.m. Just then, I heard another sound join in with the now haunting howls. A low metal creak. A distinct creaking I remembered well. The sound of the big metal gate opening behind the barn. Story 4. Every time the lamp flickers. I think this has to be my favorite day of the year. The first cold front coming through after an oppressively hot summer along the coast is a blessed change. A far cry from the 100% humidity we cope with every day. The air has a crisp quality and makes me want to spend the entire day outside. As evening set in, getting darker earlier and earlier as the year goes forward, I clicked on the lamp beside the couch, wrapped a light blanket around my legs, and settled down to read the latest novel by my favorite author. The wind was whipping hard outside. I could clearly hear it, but somehow it gave me comfort. I was barely past the latest chapter when the light from the lamp flickered. The way the wind was blowing, it came as no surprise that we may lose power or at the very least have it blink in and out. So I wasn't fazed. I got up and lit candles around the house, just in case. When I sat back down with my book, I stared at the page. I couldn't remember where I left off. I flipped back a couple of pages, and nothing seemed familiar to me. It was as though I was reading the words for the first time. I tried to think of the last thing that I could remember from the story and flipped back to find it. It was several chapters back. I shrugged it off. I attributed it to a sort of dissociative state. Everyone has those from time to time, like when you're driving home after a long day and zoning out, then suddenly realize you're nearly home. It had to be something along those lines. No harm, no foul, just pick up from where I left off. I made about 5 pages before the lights flickered again. So I got up to light candles just in case I lose power. But there are candles lit. I don't remember doing that. I walked through all of the rooms and each one had a lit candle. I could tell by the amount of wax melted that they weren't lit long ago. You would think I would remember lighting them. As I crossed into the kitchen, I saw the lamp in the living room flicker. I looked around the kitchen and couldn't remember what I came in here for. Maybe a cup of tea on a cold, blustery night. I filled the kettle and set on the burner, then headed back to the couch while I waited to hear it whistle. I decided to text my best friend, Stacy, and tell her about my strange night. I told her about not remembering the book, not remembering lighting candles, and that I still don't know why I went to the kitchen, but a cup of tea sounded nice. She got back to me, asking if I had been in any sort of accident, if I had taken a tumble and hurt my head, or anything that could account for the memory loss. I told her I hadn't, that it had been an uneventful day at home and nothing of note happened. She told me to let her know if anything else happened, that she was worried about me, and I said I would. As the kettle whistled, I set down my phone and went to make a cup of tea. I curled up back on the couch while my tea steeped on the end table next to the lamp. After about 2 minutes, I reached for my tea and the lamp flickered. I picked up my cup and blew on it as my phone chimed that I'd gotten a message. It said it was from someone named Stacy. I don't know anyone by that name. I opened the message and read it. It said she was just checking on me. This makes no sense. I scrolled up. There were messages back and forth between us, and it went on and on and on. I made my way back to where she says she is checking on me and read what was written right above it. It said that I have been having trouble remembering things, but that I have no idea what could have caused it. This is really starting to freak me out. Then the lamp flickered. Story 5. I found a stack of Polaroid pictures hidden in my son's Halloween candy. Someone's been stalking us. Neither of us knew what was waiting for us inside Max's candy bucket. We just brought it back home from trick-or-treating and unlocked the front door. The second I turned the knob, Max shot into the living room, holding his pumpkin-shaped candy bucket in both hands. He flipped it over, gave a shake, and all his candy poured out onto the carpet. Then he tossed the bucket aside. "Mommy, Mommy," he screamed. "Can I eat my candy now?" I came in behind him laughing because only a 5-year-old could get that pump about eating candy. Thank you for asking go ahead. I sat beside him, crisscross applesauce, and watched. Max worked the pile by opening a piece, tasting it, then either scrunching up his face or giggling in approval before moving on to the next. It was adorable. Seeing him like that made me smile. But as I kept watching, the moment began to sour. See, I was a single mother. We lived off my income alone. And because I was just a waitress in a small cafe, money was tight. There were some days when I could only afford to feed Max, and not myself. Whenever he asked why I wasn't eating, I'd say I already ate at the restaurant, which was a lie. Because even with my employee discount, those meals still cost money. My manager had even fired employees before for sneaking food without paying. I lied because I didn't want Max to worry. I think kids shouldn't have to worry about those kinds of things. They should be having fun like Max was doing now. But while I watched him eat his candy, and I saw the happiness he got from what only strangers could give him, something twisted up inside me. I felt like a failure as a mother. Max noticed I wasn't eating any candy and piled several pieces in front of me. "No, honey," I said, putting them back on his pile. "These are all yours. Mommy doesn't want any." "Why not?" "Because I don't want to take any from you." Once I said that, a flicker of sadness moved in his eyes. He looked up at me, almost like he was beginning to understand something about me, like he'd had a realization, wise beyond his years. It broke my heart. "Okay," I said, "just one. You choose." Max smiled. He hovered his little fingers over the pile, carefully weighing his options, and stalled over Reese's peanut butter cup. He squeezed down and lifted. Underneath, the corner of something jabbed out. It looked like a small stack of paper. It looked glossy and even gleamed in the overhead light. Whatever it was, I could tell it wasn't candy. Did one of the neighbors put something in there by accident? I reached down and pulled at the corner, and out slid a stack of Polaroid pictures. There were 3 of them, stuck together with a rubber band. "What's this, Max?" Max didn't say anything. He watched curiously as I snapped off the rubber band and flipped the stack over. The first picture framed a residential home at night. An adult woman stood on the sidewalk with a hand on her hip, watching a much smaller person, most likely a child, approach the front door. The lighting was so dark, I couldn't tell who they were, but in the child's hand, I could see them gripping onto something, like a pail or a bucket. Right then, I got it. This was a parent watching her child go trick-or-treating. Yep, one of the neighbors must have put this in here by mistake. I wondered who it was. I flipped to the next picture. I actually recognized the subject in this one. It was my neighbor, Terry, standing at his open front door. Someone who was hidden just beneath the frame held up a bucket, and Terry, smiling warmly like always, dropped a few pieces of candy in. Something about that bucket caught my eye. I studied it, noticing its circular shape, and realized it was designed to look like a pumpkin. My eyes drifted over to Max's pumpkin-shaped bucket on the carpet. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't want to jump to any conclusions. I flipped to the final picture. It was a shot of an open window, taken from behind a bush. A few out-of-focus leaves dangled in the foreground, but in sharp focus, right in the center of the picture, was my son's smiling face. I was behind him, zipping up his costume, just before we went trick-or-treating. We were standing inside this very room. "Max," I said, keeping my voice as calm as possible, "which house gave you these?" Max scrunched up his forehead while he thought. He shrugged. Then he reached for another piece of candy. I blocked his hand. "Stop. Don't eat any more of that." I stood, glanced around. I was beginning to panic. "How come?" "Because I said so. Don't ask questions right now." Max began to cry. I ran to the front door to check the lock. It was already set. Okay, I'd just taken my son trick-or-treating. Someone was following us. They took pictures of us, and then dropped those pictures inside his bucket. We only went around our neighborhood, so it had to be one of our neighbors who did it. Was this some kind of sick joke? Or was one of them really stalking us? What do I do? I looked past the living room, into the kitchen. My phone was on the island counter. I raced over to it and dialed 911. It rang twice. Then the operator answered. 911, what's your emergency? Yes, I dash. Max interrupted, tugging on my leg, crying for me to let him eat more candy. Honey, I will buy you more candy. But Mommy is on the phone, right, Dash? 911. The operator repeated. Please state your emergency. Yes, we need help, please. I think someone is stalking me. The operator took down my name, address, and details about what happened. 10 minutes later, 2 officers were at my house. One shone a flashlight around my property while the other one, a young, tall officer, came to the door. He introduced himself as Officer Dan and asked for photos. I'm Jenny, and this is all of them, I said, handing them over. He took them with a gloved hand and scanned over the first one. While I waited, I felt Max stir behind me. He was hiding behind my legs, peeking up at the officer. Officer Dan flipped to the second one, looked at it, then cleared his throat. Who's the man here? That's my neighbor, Terry, but it couldn't be him. He's a good man. I'm sure he is, he said. He flipped to the final picture. He studied it, and as he drank in the details, the faint lines around his eyes sharpened. He looked down at Max, then up to me. So what's going to happen now? I said. My voice sounded more desperate than I had intended. We're going to sweep the neighborhood. Even if we don't find anything, there'll be an officer nearby to patrol every hour. Also, we'll speak with Mr. Terry, not because he's a suspect, but just in case he's seen any suspicious activity. Also, I see that he has a ring camera. We'll check the footage on that as well. Now, ma'am, he took a glance behind me. Is it just you two in the house? Yes, I said. Just us. Is there somewhere else you can stay tonight? Maybe with friends or family? There wasn't. All my friends were my husband's. And once he left me, so did they. I started to answer, but was caught by surprise when tears welled in my eyes. Whether it was the stress of our situation or just me being scared, I didn't know. I blinked them away before they could fall and shook my head. No, it's just us. He nodded. Well, there's a DoubleTree down the road. Wouldn't be a bad idea for you guys to book a room tonight. Book a room? I don't even know how I'm going to feed Max tomorrow. Officer, that's not really an option for us. Officer Dan gave me this look then. Honestly, it wasn't so different from the one Max sometimes gave me. With Max, I always thought it was a normal sadness that kids feel when they don't get their way. But with the officer, there was something deeper. I think he actually felt sorry for me. And I never wanted that. I never wanted that from anybody. I felt embarrassed. Look, he said, pulling a pencil and notepad from his shirt pocket. This is my personal number. Doesn't matter what time, if you need anything at all, give me a call. I'll be close. Thank you, officer. Just stand, he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. Then he turned and left. I closed the door and rested my forehead on it. Mommy? Max said, what's happening? I shut my eyes. It's all right, sweetie. Mommy's just trying to fix a problem. That's all. We both got quiet. A few seconds passed. Will we be okay? I think so. Come on, let's go get ready for bed. Sleep in Mommy's room tonight. I'll come tuck you in. Okay, Max said. He ran up the stairs without a care in the world. I put Officer Dan's number on speed dial. Then I checked every door and every window to make sure the house was totally locked down. Half an hour later, I tucked Max into my bed, kissed him goodnight, and closed the door behind me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Officer Dan. He told me the neighborhood was clear, but they'd keep a close watch. My heart sank. I had hoped they would have caught the bastard, and we could put this whole mess behind us. All the same, I thanked the officer and told him goodnight. Sleep was out of the question. Instead, I'd fix a cup of coffee and sit up all night. And if I heard so much as a twig snap outside, I was calling the cops. I headed downstairs to start on the coffee. My chest tightened with anxiety. He was still out there. I just knew it. Probably even close by. What if he was standing outside the house at that very moment? I caught myself biting on a fingernail and stopped. That was a bad habit I developed when I was a kid, but nowadays, it only flared up during moments of high stress. I passed through the kitchen, and opened the cabinet, fishing out both my Maxwell House coffee grounds and a filter. I loaded the filter, dumped in a few scoops, and hit brew. Then I stood there a moment, feeling myself wanting to cry again. Damn it, Jenny. Now is not the time to get emotional. You're the adult. Here, hold it together. Something on the island countertop beside me shined in my periphery. I glanced over. Then I stared for a long time, in disbelief, trying to make absolutely certain that my eyes weren't deceiving me. Sitting right there on the countertop was a fresh set of Polaroid pictures. That was impossible. I'd given the officer everything I had. Was I losing my mind? I reached out, almost scared to touch them, and gently picked them up. In the first picture, Max was hiding behind my legs while I spoke with Officer Dan. Only this shot wasn't taken through an open window. From outside the house, it was taken from behind us. From inside the house, my mind struggled to process what I was seeing. There was no way an intruder could have entered the house and taken a picture with an officer standing right there. I flipped to the next one. This one was of me in my bedroom, tucking my son into bed, and the way it was shot looked like something only possible in a dream. It was captured from a bird's eye view, directly above our heads. A blade from the ceiling fan even cut into the edge of the frame, because it was taken so close to the light. The shot was overexposed, which put a hazy kind of filter over it. This defied all logic. To get that picture, whoever or whatever took it would have to have been suspended from the ceiling. They would have to have manipulated themselves into an impossible angle, all without me or Max knowing. My hands were trembling now. The room was beginning to spin. Terrified now, I flipped to the final picture. It was of me, my back facing the camera, standing in my kitchen. I was looking down, studying something in my hands, just like I was now at this very moment. The shot was taken so close behind me. Whatever had taken it could have reached out and touched me. I needed to get Max out of the house. Right now, click, something snapped directly behind my head. Then the room was quiet again. My mind took a moment to register what it even was. But slowly, a sick realization slithered up from the pit of my stomach. What I had just heard was the shudder of a Polaroid camera. The camera's inner mechanisms hummed as it worked to print out the picture. I froze. I stopped breathing. In a desperate attempt, I tried reasoning with the intruder. "What do you want from me?" I cried. I listened for a response, still holding the pictures in my trembling fingers. There was no reply. The picture finished printing, and whatever was behind me stood perfectly still. Several seconds ticked by. Was it waiting for me to turn around? Across the counter, against the back wall, was a block of kitchen knives. I wished they were closer, but they were way out of reach. Depending on what happened next, maybe I could get to them. But for now, I would have to turn and face whatever was behind me, head on, one slow inch at a time. I turned my head, my heart pounding inside my chest. I expected to be stabbed or choked or grabbed at any second. I turned a little bit further, then shot a glance back. The kitchen was empty. I exhaled, but a new fear, much greater than before, exploded inside me. It's gonna get Max. I dropped the pictures and shot around the counter and ripped out the biggest knife from the block. Then I dug out my phone and hit call on Officer Dan's contact. Call failed. I tapped the screen several more times. Call failed. Call failed. Call failed. I slammed it on the counter in a fit of anger. Of all the times when my phone did not work, of course it would be now. I had no other option. I'd have to run upstairs and get Max by myself. I moved through the downstairs with a knife aimed in front of me. I checked around every corner and every piece of furniture I passed. I sprinted up the stairs, then through the upstairs hallway, toward my bedroom. I pushed the bedroom door open slowly, horrified that it had already beaten me there. Thankfully, Max was still in the covers, safe and sound. I peeled the blanket off him and scooped him up in my arms. "Mommy," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Sure, we have to go. Stay quiet." He wrapped his arms around me and put his head on my shoulder. I crept over the door and peeked into the hallway. Empty. I carried Max down the hall, toward the stairs. If we could just make it out the front door, I'd run straight to the neighbors and call the cops from there. Just a short trip down the stairs and through the living room. We could do it. When we neared the steps, I heard the worst noise imaginable. Footsteps pounding up the stairs. My mind entered into fight or flight mode. Should I attack? Give Max a chance to run? No, I can't leave him. He'd never get away. I backed up. To my right was my son's bedroom. I ducked inside and rushed the closet. I inched open the door as quietly as I could, but still, it squealed on its hinges. We slid inside. There was barely enough space for both of us. I clicked the door shut and stood in front of Max, using my body as a shield. Mommy, what are we doing? I turned and cupped a hand over his mouth. Not another word. We listened. With each passing second, the footsteps grew closer until they arrived at the bedroom door. Then they slowed to a nice and easy stroll and entered the room. Floorboards creaked under a shifting weight. Something paced across the room, from left to right, like it was searching for us. Once it reached the right wall, it stopped, then turned and moved toward the closet. I tightened my grip on the knife. A stream of adrenaline coursed through my veins, making my skin tingle. I fought hard to keep my mind clear and focused. If the door opened, I would take them by surprise. Hammer the blade down in one. Quick motion. It was all I had. It came right up to the door and stopped. The sound of our own breathing filled the closet. A floorboard creaked. Every nerve inside my body screamed. What is it doing? Why is it just standing there? Then a camera clicked. Through the gap under the door, a light flashed. Against all logic, all reason, it had taken a picture of the closet door. A deep, yet childlike laughter vibrated into the closet. The camera clicked again. It knew exactly where we were, and it was playing games. It was toying with us. Max's body trembled behind me, and a soft whimper escaped from his lips. I prepared myself. The door would open any moment, and it was up to me to save our lives. I raised the knife so I could swing it down right as the door opened. I held my breath. I listened as the handle jiggled and began to turn. The door swung open. I hacked the knife blindly in front of me. Officer Dan staggered backwards just in time. Whoa! Whoa! I darted my eyes around the room, looking for it, looking for blood. I was frantic. It's just me. It's just me. No one is here. I've got you. You're safe. No, we're not. It was just here. I heard Dash. We have multiple officers searching your home. No one is here. I scanned the room again. There was no camera, no creature, no obvious threat. The stress of what had just occurred began weighing down on me. I lost my sense of balance and stumbled. Officer Dan caught me by the arm. He guided me toward Max's bed. As I sat down, Max darted out from the closet and jumped onto the bed and clung on to me. You called me, remember? Officer Dan said, but you didn't say anything. So we were afraid something had happened. We forced open the front door. Then I heard you guys in here. Did you think he broke in? I know he did. There were footsteps, and there's more pictures. Just look on the counter, Dash. There are no signs of forced entry, Jenny. Officer Dan paused and glanced over at the closet door. He ran his palms together, then approached the bed. He took a seat beside us. You know, sometimes in high-stress situations, our minds produce things, sounds, images, things like that aren't really there. It's perfectly normal. Given your situation, it's possible that that's all that happened. Don't talk to me like that, Dan. Don't talk to me like I'm crazy. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. You're a cop, not a therapist. Get off the bed. Once I'd snapped on him, Officer Dan had no more psychotherapeutic explanations for me. He stood and left us alone in the room. He left the house, in fact. But some of the other officers were kind enough to stay with us until morning. For the rest of the night, there were no more signs of the intruder. The next day, I applied for a credit card and checked us into a hotel. I also put that house on the market. A week later, someone bought it. I took the money and bought a new house in a completely different state. even though the old one sold well under its value. I didn't care. As long as we left behind whatever was in there, we had all we needed. At Max's new school, I met a group of moms I became friends with, and that made a huge improvement on my quality of life. For the first time in a long time, I had people who cared about me. These ladies checked up on me, came over for wine night, got me out of my house. They even introduced me to a great guy who I'm still dating. Max made some new friends of his own, and he seemed happy at his new school. For a while, things were pretty great. This morning, I put a note in Max's lunchbox, telling him how much I loved him. I know that is incredibly lame, but I couldn't help myself. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I always want him to know that. When he got home from school, he threw his lunchbox on the counter, ran up to me, and kissed me on the cheek. "I love you too, Mommy," he said. Then he went into his room to do his homework. My heart filled with joy. I was floating as I started to clean out his lunchbox. Then, for the first time in a long time, I actually cried. I cried because at that moment, I loved my life. I wish things would stay like that forever. I took the ice pack out of the lunchbox, then turned it upside down over the trash can. A few plastic baggies dropped into the trash, and then a piece of paper fluttered out, paper made of a different material from the one I'd written a note on. This one was glossy, small, and square. It was a Polaroid. Violent images flooded my mind. The flash under the door, the camera click, demonic laughter. I leaned against the wall. I was having trouble breathing. "Calm down," I told myself. "Calm down, breathe. That's it." Maybe it was just something Max was working on in class. I fished the picture out of the trash. It was taken inside a classroom. Kids sat at their desks, talking amongst themselves. It was all normal enough. But then I noticed the angle at which the photo was taken. It was taken from the back of the classroom, shooting down at the kids' heads, almost like it was taken from the ceiling. Centered in the picture, held in sharp focus, was Max's smiling face. He was captured mid-laugh. I screamed and dropped the picture. It spiraled to the ground and landed face down. There was a note scribbled on the back. Now, I don't know what to do. I thought it was the house. I thought that if we moved, we would leave that thing behind. But now I know it was all in vain, because it followed us. On the back, written in dark red ink, were the words, "I love you too, Jenny." Story 6. All we do is take. Entry 1. I promise, every piece I take will be painless. So long as you promise to do me the same kindness when it's your turn, he said. How many times had I heard those words? How many times had I said them to him? How many times have we made good on that deal? How many times have we not? Everything has a price. Everything. I didn't know I was paying for anything, or paying with anything until Sunday morning. My usual nightly ritual of waking up right before dawn with a guttural scream was uninterrupted. The dark of my room blocking my vision allowed me to feel the texture of drenched sweat in the sheets and scorch in my vocal cords much more vividly than I ever preferred. Another dream, with him within. There weren't many dreams I had that weren't with him. Black stubble around the chin, those piercing blue eyes, that crooked smile. A table made of wood. Soldiers with pikes and polearms around me were feasting. He was next to me, a great battle on a field, my feet splashing of blood in puddles. He marched beside me, topless women in a brothel squeezing good coin out of patrons. He was across the bar, a lady in his lap, and mug raised to me. No matter the place, no matter the context, he always showed up. The endings were always the same, however. The inside of a dark chamber with stone walls, lit by an unseen hearth. One of us in the other's arms, pouring blood and bile from the wound. A cloaked figure standing behind us, holding a chain weaved through severed fingers and tongues. It touches us, searing pain shooting into our brainstem. It's then I wake up, trying to wipe the memory of the cloaked figure from my mind until our next nightly meeting. I brushed the hair away from my face back atop my head. Something about it fell off of my hand. Like new tufts grew overnight. I reached up with the same hand and felt the strands to find the same feeling between my middle and ring finger. my ring finger, like the hair passed through it as if incorporeal. Slowly, my other hand rose and met its counterpart and felt around the fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 4. With a worried gasp, I shot up from the soak mattress, ran to the wall, flipped the switch, and was illuminated. It was gone. The finger was gone. Between the first and second knuckle, a patch of skin grew over the knob like an age-old wound. What the fuck? I muttered under my breath, my panic taking away any potential for shouting. What the fuck? I dashed back to the bed and scanned the blotches of perspirant for any sign of red. Nothing. Rifling through the sheets next, I found no detached appendage hiding within the folds. The digit had disappeared, leaving nothing but a half-inch lump of flesh as a goodbye. My next surprise was a clock on my wall, chiming 7 a.m. on the dot. I was going to be late for work. Leave it to America to pressure you into feeling bad for a late clock-in when you just lost a finger. But I needed the job, and I couldn't handle finding another. And how do you explain that? Someone would notice. Lena would notice. I swallowed my fright best I could and scrounged around my 400 SQ/FT hovel for solution. In a drawer rested my sleek winter gloves, which I had retired for the season, seeing as how it was July. But I was out of time and out of answers. So on a slip and out the door I went. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. If, in orientation, a company states they are a family, do yourselves a favor and run. The Super Steel Grocery had it plastered all over their slideshow when I showed up on my first day. And after 3 years, I can say, without a doubt, if there's a hell that has numbered aisles, I stepped into the fiery automated gates of the Super Steel, heart still pounding, and mind still racing as to the location of my extremity. Just get back from the slopes? A woman's voice called out. Lena's voice. I snapped my head to the origin of the joke, to see her standing at her usual spot at the checkout, her hair done up and clothes picked out as the rulebook specified. She smiled and waved at me. I eked out a nervous grin and started to raise my injured hand. Stopped myself, lowered it, raised the other hand, and waved back. A joke from Lena usually warranted a response from me. So when I abruptly walked away into the maze of shelves, she glowered. I rushed to the stockroom, slapped on my name badge, and spun around to dash for my first U-cart when I was stopped in my tracks by David, my manager, the ever-watching eye drenched in powder blue and horrible khaki, a man of which you get the impression his much younger wife starts drinking at noon. Apparently, she started earlier today, as David's face was not pleased. Not pleased less than usual anyway. It's 7:35. Did you know that? He sighed. I was hour dash. I began, then cut off by David's nasally, piercing drone. 20 minutes, as opposed to 7:15. Your start time. He had this way of getting to a point without ever really arriving at it that drove me crazy. I stood there in silence. He stared at me expecting a response to a question he never posed. But apparently my silence was good enough as he grunted and moved on to his next subject. What's with the gloves? David snarked. I looked around for any help. Luckily, I found it stacked all about. The boxes, dry hands, you know? Figure I'd try something different. Gloves are not a uniform standard. Get some lotion and show up on time, David finished, then quickly walking away before I could respond. I would have worried more about David if I thought he'd be worth the capacity to worry. After that ordeal, I stormed off, a cart stacked with various super processed cereals, and got to work. If it wasn't for the empty finger sleeve of the glove getting caught under heavy tins, I might have had 5 seconds of a clear mind, but that wasn't in plans. I mean, really, it wouldn't be a clear mind. How could you not constantly think about it? Between the mac and cheese boxes and the peanut butter jars, I hypothesized theories. Perhaps a parallel dimension butted up against ours and other me, -1 counter, and I fused? Or maybe I hadn't woken up yet. A vivid dream mimicking my life, trying to parse through years of trauma symbolized in a lost finger? Had I lost it a long time ago, and through some complicated self-delusion thought I had it? But why would I decide today of all days to let the delusion go? None of my calculations added up as you would guess. almost done with the day and not nearly done with my panic. I was caught off guard by a tap on the shoulder. Turning around, I saw a receding hand with all fingers counted for, connected to an arm, connected to Lena. She smiled at me. I smiled back. Lena was the only person in this town, or in my life, I could really call friend. She had moved here with her parents last year to finish out high school and work part-time. I trained her, and she immediately weaseled her way into my life, a feat all my past friends said was impossible. She had good magnetism like that, knew who to pick and who they were. I mean, I've been out of school for almost 8 years, and she's almost out. That's a very creepy combo if you pick the wrong pal. But she never did. She was good like that. "Hey, nerd, what was it this morning?" she asked. "I mean, I was already late and dash." I stuttered, and she laughed. "I'm fucking with you. I was just wondering if we're still on for Tuesday." Tuesday. I had completely forgotten. The Boardwalk Festival. It was her first, and as she put it, she wanted a townie, aka me, to show her all the good digs. I didn't know how I felt about being called a townie. Or being one. Yes, definitely. Still happening. Yep, I cover my absent-mindedness. Good. Now get to it, Glove Man, she said as she walked away. "Glove Man? You've done better." I called to her. "I'm sure I will later," she answered back one last time. Bouncing between my existential dread and plans with Lena made the day go by pretty fast, but not enough to forget to punch out and leave as soon as permitted. As I exited the Super Steel, I was warned to a presence at my right side. Before I got a chance to look, the presence spoke. "Sir," he asked me. I turned around, and at the sight of the man, another medical miracle happened upon me. In the onset of great fear or shock, sometimes the lungs will reverse their function and squeeze the breath out of themselves, leaving a pseudo-suffocated feeling within the user. I was pseudo-suffocating. The seemingly homeless man had that black stubble around the chin, those piercing blue eyes, that crooked smile. Him, from within, the man who only my dreams allowed visitation, right in front of me, like he leaped from my brain onto the pavement. "I think we should talk," he said. Get the fuck away from me," I stammered. If it was a hallucination, I didn't want to talk to myself in public. If it wasn't, I had no interest in whatever he brought with him. I sped my way down the parking lot, glancing back at him, to which he gave chase, but only for a moment before falling back. "It'll only get worse until you talk to me," he shouted across the concrete and cars. Nope, I had clearly snapped. I had problems, some of which affected me since childhood, but never had they manifested. Literally, I glanced back once more to see the man had gone, then immediately whipped out my phone and dialed. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. "I told you, Dr. Adler, I just need a new prescription," I told my therapist after being scurried into his office. "I'm not doing well off of them." "Well, my boy, I haven't seen you in some months. I think a session would help me understand." Adler motioned me to sit. Reluctantly, I did. Another billable hour. Good for him. Dr. Adler was my therapist, as you may guess. And at this moment, the only thing keeping me from blurting out a delusional rant was the fact his office couch's springs were stabbing my ass like a downed gazelle. Dr. Adler had the same wording condition as David, although he was paid to. David was just born annoyingly vague. He pulled out his notebook and case file on me, and got to work staring me down and scratching his chin at me. I got to work figuring out a way not to be sent to the hospital. I'm feeling unstable, like all the pieces of me aren't there. I tried to explain. Don't blame me. Ironic metaphor was all I had. Adler scribbled a word or two down. And what is the source of this uneasy feeling? I don't know. The nightmares won't stop. My job is hellish. I have a pick of the litter for sources to my problem. But I know the solution, which is why I'm here for my Medicat dash. Your mother, did she reach out at all since our last session? This is what I meant. He asked this knowing the answer already. And I know he did it, because shrinks want you to get to the answer yourself for impact. The only problem was we had this mother breakthrough 4 years ago. See, I was a paying customer, and Dr. Adler knew without better quality treatment there was nowhere else to go for me. But then I wouldn't pay him anymore. So he took a note from the Bible of all television stations. If all else fails, we run it. But there was a snag with his approach. it was something completely different. It was a missing appendage, a dream talking to and following me. I had lulled Adler into a sense of routine, that there was no more to me. Why would he have reason to assume something else? He wanted to go no further, because to him, I was open and shut. I couldn't go any further, because what was happening to me only happens to padded cell patients. I knew I just needed the meds, so I played along, open and shut. No, she is not. I told you we went no contact. I said quietly, does it maybe hurt you that it's so easy for her to respect that wish? He asked. No, I don't know. Maybe, but I know it's the best. People with trauma sometimes develop an unhealthy relationship with it. For the first time, your life is becoming stable, and thus you feel the opposite because it is uncharted territory. He wasn't wrong, but he scored a goal on a completely different field than mine. My mother was a touchy subject for me, one I don't care go into right now. I knew I wasn't going to get anything from him. I didn't really, from anyone. I was never one to have groups of friends or family until Lena, and I knew I couldn't tell her either. I was used to being lonely, but the feeling of loneliness always rears its head to remind you in new and piercing ways. An unsolvable puzzle that made you not only the solver but the puzzle itself, enthralled in its twisting mazes leading to nothing. I played along with his act for the rest of the session, both of us catching one another staring at the clock. I stood up at the chime of the hour. He stood as well, handed me a script, and I exited. I spent the rest of the night downing a pill with water, staring at my ceiling until my eyelids could no longer take the weightless weight of sleep, forcing them to shut. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. He laid in my arms this time, crimson leaking from a slash to the stomach that had found its way, also exiting the mouth with each rattled breath. The heat from the hearth warmed my back inside my armor. I wiped the blood away from his mouth. Anything, the woman said, her chains with bloody pieces strung around it clanging about as she paced about us, taking us in for all our mortal weakness. Anything, just save him. I say, back to her, desperation stuck in my throat. And of course, after all of this, I woke up again. Story 7. I talked to a man who says he's stuck in an endless cycle, and some of the things he talked about are coming true. Let me preface this by saying that I do not know this man. I can't find his name anywhere on social media or in any sort of database. Believe me, I tried. It started last Friday. I was getting ready for Halloween, and I spent most of the day outside carving pumpkins on my porch. My hands were coated in the slimy guts and pumpkin seeds when I saw someone walking down the street. He was tall, about 6 feet 2 inches. He had short, curly hair and a thick beard that seemingly swallowed his lips. He had a button-up flannel shirt, overalls, and a straw hat. He looked like any old farmer that passed by the house on a tractor. So I paid no mind him until he stopped in front of my house and just stared at me. I did the courteous thing and waved at him, and he waved back in turn. Yet he didn't budge. Can I help you? HM, you always say that. I'm sorry. Never mind. Okay? I went back to the pumpkins, and I started drawing the patterns for the jack-o'-lanterns. I was deep in concentration when I noticed a man was now walking up to me. I put my marker down and spoke. Change your mind? No, but do you mind if I help? I thought it was odd to have a stranger carve pumpkins with me, but I had bought 12, so I took the help. He was gifted with a knife. He put in an elaborate design that looked exactly like that spiral hill scene from A Nightmare Before Christmas. Wow, that's beautiful. I told him. He smiled as he sat it down next to him. He sighed and said, "You're a nice man, Franklin. Only thing is that I never told him my name." I looked at him and felt unease wash over me like a bucket of cold water. "How do you know my name?" "I just know these things. I know a lot of things. I know you got 2 dogs. One is a dachshund, and the other is a chihuahua. Your daughters have named them Brat and Taco." "How do Dash?" "I'm not done. You've got a wife named Emily, and today she'll tell you that she's pregnant with a little boy. And on the news, they'll mention that an aerial strike from Russia will have struck the California coast." I laughed at first, expecting him to laugh with me. He had to have been a co-worker of my wife's or a friend of a friend. But he wasn't laughing. He seemed overwhelmed with sadness. Listen, friend, I'd talk more, but you're making me feel a little weirded out. I think I'll take care of the pumpkins. God damn it, he grumbled, pinching his brow. I'm sorry. I rushed it again. Just let me explain it over coffee. Do you have coffee? I was hesitant. He was odd, but he didn't strike me as a dangerous person. I told him to wait on the porch. My wife asked me who I was talking to, and all I said it was some guy. I brought out 2 black cups of coffee outside. Steam rolled off their times against the cold air. He smiled as he grabbed his cup. I gave my cup one sip and asked, "Well, I'm listening." Right. It's funny. I keep doing this, having this conversation with people. I keep thinking I have enough time on my hands each time I roll back to the beginning. I guess you could say it started when I died. I listened intently and try to hide my expression of complete bewilderment. Now, I know what you're thinking. I sound like an insane person, but just let me explain. I passed away on July 17th, 2051, 99 years old. I was ready to go home, embrace my Lord and my family, and then I'm in a hospital surrounded by doctors, and I see my mother holding me. So, you were reincarnated? No, reborn. I was back to the year of my birth, but I was full of a lifetime's worth of knowledge. I knew the outcome of so many events in not just my life, but in history. I tried to change these events, but what? The old man wiped his eyes. Would you believe me if the life you're living right now is the best possible outcome? I thought about the current state of things. War, famine, genocide, poverty, so many awful things. I gave my answer. No, I like to think there's a better life than this. The old man gripped my hand. His palm was callous and rough. I've lived hundreds of lives. I've tried to change so many of them, but every change leads to something horrible. I tipped the FBI about the 9/11 terror attacks. But you know what happened afterward? The bastards tried again, went after that year's Super Bowl. Dove the plane right into the stadium. It's like a house of cards. You pluck one thing out, it all goes to shit. I sipped my coffee. The man was obviously insane. So I decided to ask him a question. But before I could ask it, he said, "You're going to ask me what's in hand. You've got 3 pennies and a quarter. Of maybe this time you grabbed your keys, which has a fidget attached to it. A little clicker, I believe." I put the change back in my pocket and stared at him with a slack-jawed expression. Before I asked him another question, he plucked the words from my lips. "You're going to ask me for a detail about you only you would know. You had a daughter. Her name was going to be Robin. She was a stillborn." I felt my stomach drop and asked him, "So what are you exactly?" Some sort of fucking time loop sage spouting out advice. "Listen, I'm not even sure what I am anymore, but all I can do is prepare people." "For what?" "The end of everything. I thought you died at 99, not of old age." He drank the rest of his coffee and seized a pumpkin. He extended an open palm to me. "May I?" I handed him a knife, and he started whittling away at the gourd. "Today, Russia will strike the California coast. You mentioned that earlier. When?" He looked at his watch, and with heavy eyes, he told me, 6 hours from now. You'll get a notification about it soon." "And what then?" "A third world war to be quick." "Jesus, what happens?" "The missiles will fly, and the presidents will point fingers and make claims. But both sides don't have enough humility to end the war to save their own nations. In the end, the people rise up, start killing their leaders in the streets, just like the French Revolution. What about us? Everyone living around here? To be honest, we don't see a lot of conflict outside of the occasional air raid, where we've got to go to storm shelters and bunkers. When the dust settles, things will be good for a while. For a while, unfortunately, we neglected the planet to the point of no return. Many animals die, coral reefs blackened by oil, smog-covered skies. Enjoy the blue sky while you can, because after the war, it ain't coming back. It'll be hard to breathe." And then he was silent. He dropped the jack-o'-lantern onto the grass and clasped his hands together. The atmosphere starts to erode. By the time I was in the nursing home, I can't even describe it. It's just like the Earth we knew, and then it was overtaken by a sudden darkness. That's the last thing I remembered. The screams of terror, and then it all goes black. Why tell me? Why not? I'm here for some reason, and I think it's to help common folk like y'all. It'll be hard, but you'll survive until it's time for the Earth to end. I felt a rush existential fear overtake me. I was beginning to shake, but he took my hand and spoke softly. It's not here yet, but it will be. Be prepared. And then he was gone, like I'd never even met him. I tried looking for him in town, but there's no sign of him. I write this because maybe I should be sharing his message too. If you see him, listen to him. As I'm writing this up, I'm looking at the television showing images of scorched California coastal cities. The president will be speaking in 10 minutes, and the number one thing trending on social media right now is World War III. Even after our conversation, I was hoping he was just some nut who was able to luckily guess some details about my life. But now I know he was telling the truth. God help us. He was right. Story 8. My trip became a nightmare. I'd never driven to Miami before. I was supposed to go years ago, but things shut down and travel felt impossible. When life finally returned to something normal, I planned to drive myself. Half the places my friend Jeremy and I talked about seeing were gone for good, but I figured I'd still make the trip. I was somewhere in the middle of nowhere when it happened. The radio cut from Dr. Dre to pure static. The screen didn't glitch, it melted. The station numbers warping into strings of random letters like the signal was trying to speak. Before I could touch the dial, it slid to volume control on its own. I turned it down and pretended I didn't just watch my car try to communicate with me. 3 minutes later, the sky darkened. Heavy clouds rolled in so fast it felt like someone switched them on. Then came the rain. Thick sheets pounding the windshield, even though it was the middle of summer and the app had promised clear skies. The GPS said I had 53 kilometers left. Yeah, kilometers. I stick to metric. It makes more sense. But the distance wasn't what froze me. It was a faint yellow fuel light flickering like something breathing. I should have noticed it earlier. Jeremy told me to top up before leaving, and I shrugged it off. I prayed there was a service stop nearby. Somehow, the highway spat one out just ahead, like it had been waiting for me. The rain stopped instantly, not slowly, just gone. I wiped the windshield once, and through the street glass I saw a road sign, or what was left of one. The metal hung crooked, dangling from a single bolt. The wind should have torn it down already, yet it clung there like it had a purpose. The service area looked abandoned from afar, but the lights were on. I pulled in, stepped out, and walked toward the bathrooms before fueling up. Inside, a handful of people sat at the fast food counters. Subway, KFC, a small Chinese place, and a dim little cafe. No one talked. No one looked up. They ate like they were trying to remember how food worked. Between the restaurants sat a narrow storefront, barely wide enough for a door. The only reason I noticed it was a fading sign above it, souvenir. I don't know why I went in. Habit, maybe. Inside, an elderly woman sat at the register. Silver hair pulled into a tight bun, thin glasses, a crossword book open in front of her. She didn't move when I stepped inside. Didn't nod. Didn't blink. She just stared like she'd been expecting me. The shop was nothing special. Dusty postcards, cheap bracelets, hats, old shirts. The kind of stuff you only buy when you run out of reasons to keep moving. Then I saw it. A cap with the old Miami Bull logo. Not the current one. The old one that got pulled years back after a plagiarism dispute. Jeremy always joked about buying one if he ever found it. We used to wear the original logo in high school. Our principal was obsessed with that team. Seeing it here felt impossible. I don't know why that souvenir shop bothered me so much. IT was just off the highway. Cracked neon buzzing like it was dying. The shelves were packed with old-looking junk, not antiques, but things that felt wrong, like props from a place that remembered the past differently than we do. I found a shirt with a bull mascot, Team Bulls, the logo nearly identical to my old high school's. Same colors, same snarl, only a tiny detail in the eye was different. like someone copied it from memory after years underground. I bought it as a joke for my friend Jeremy. A Pepsi too. The clerk didn't say a single word. Didn't even look at me. Just scanned my stuff and slid the bag across the counter like he was afraid to touch me. The drive to Miami should have been easy. But 20 minutes later, as I rolled into the city, everything felt off, like the joyful beach scene outside my window was staged. Too bright, too clean, like it was trying too hard. Then the man appeared in front of my car. I slammed the brakes, tires screaming. A kid stepped out from behind him, pale, dripping ice cream down his wrist. The man just stared at me, eyes wide like I'd committed a sin, like I wasn't supposed to arrive. My heart nearly stopped. I parked a block away and sat there shaking, trying to breathe. I kept telling myself I was tired, that I was just imagining the look he gave me. By the time I made it to Jeremy's place, the sun was dipping. He was waiting outside with his dog, Rudolph, friendly, brown-eyed mutt, wagging so hard his whole body wiggled. I put the cap from the souvenir shop on him, and we laughed. For a moment it felt normal. Then evening settled in, and something in the house felt watching. Jeremy talked, hospital stories, burnout, pandemic exhaustion. I tried to listen, but my eyelids felt heavy, like the room itself was pulling me down. The dog trotted into the garden. The sitcom played. Jeremy kept talking, not looking at me. And then I heard it, a sharp crack, like was splitting under heat. I jerked upright. Jeremy didn't react. Just kept talking, voice steady, eyes on the TV. I looked outside. Rudolph was running across the yard, but he wasn't a dog anymore. He was a shape, burning, flickering, moving wrong, like fire had decided to imitate a living thing. I yelled Jeremy's name, shouted about his dog, but when I looked, Rudolph was right there beside him, yawning, perfectly fine, like nothing happened. I told myself it was shock from the near accident earlier, fatigue, stress. I tried to breathe, tried to act normal. Jeremy got water for me, ordered pizza. We ate while the sun went down, and the house seemed to settle deeper into the earth. Then the TV flickered. A game show. The contestant looked like Jeremy, nearly identical, except for the hair. The question was about the Greek goddess Hestia. Fire. Jeremy yelled at the TV, half joking, and then he froze. His eyes went wide. "There is fire," he whispered. In the garden, I turned, and I saw it again. The burning shape, running, panicked, with the unmistakable outline of a dog in flame. We raced outside with water, smothered the fire, choking on smoke and panic. When the flames died, the shape collapsed, and what was left wasn't a burnt animal. It was nothing, just scorched ground, steaming, like something had burned its way out of the world. When we turned around, Rudolph was behind us, tail wagging, tongue lolling, perfectly unharmed. But his eyes were wrong. They reflected the fire, even in the dark. The silence between us felt like a living thing. When I looked at Jeremy, I recognized every emotion clawing across his face. Fear, regret, a crushing sort of dread that I'd never seen on another human being before. It wasn't just that something bad had happened. It was that something wrong had settled over us, and we both knew it. There were no tears. He didn't shake or scream. He just stared past me, as if the world outside the window had shifted into something he didn't recognize anymore. Then a knock rattled the front door. A woman's voice drifted through. A neighbor asking if everything was all right. "Yeah," Jeremy said. "Everything's fine." It wasn't. I knew it. He knew it. When the door clicked shut again, silence swallowed the room. For a moment, neither of us moved. Time didn't feel real. Finally, Jeremy spoke without looking at me. "We'll talk about it later," he muttered. I tried to respond, but he was already walking upstairs. The door closed. A second later, I heard beer caps tapping against wood. I didn't sleep. Every time my eyes shut, I saw it again. That thing, those impossible moments, the nightmare that didn't feel like a dream at all. When morning finally came, my brain felt hollow and heavy at the same time. It took a minute before I could even remember what I dreamed, and when it hit me, the fear returned like a punch. I had been running up a hill, chasing Jeremy through thick fog. It felt like an old horror game. Grainy atmosphere. No sound except my breathing and the crunch of dirt. Jeremy never turned around. The closer I got, the thicker the fog became, until I couldn't see my own hands. Then the ground disappeared beneath my feet. I was about to pitch off a cliff. I stopped just in time, and the fog dissolved. Jeremy's footprints ended right at the edge. One incomplete print hung there like he'd stepped into nothing. A soft knock snapped me awake for real. "You up?" Jeremy asked through the door. I told him yes, or at least I think I did, and dragged myself out of bed. He had already made pancakes. Outside the window, a small mound of dirt rested in the grass. On top of it sat a photograph, Rudolph's picture. He didn't say anything about it, didn't look at it, just slid a plate toward me and chewed in silence. I understood. We weren't supposed to talk about last night. Whatever happened, whatever we saw, it wasn't meant to be spoken out loud. After breakfast, Jeremy insisted we take my car. "Trust me," he said quietly. "You'll want to leave when you want to." He smiled like it was a joke, but I could tell it wasn't. He claimed he knew a place. Coral beaches in the woods, he called it. That phrase has been stuck in my head ever since. I don't think it's a real thing people say, but he acted like I should have known. He didn't wear hiking clothes. No boots, no gear, just jeans and that faded baseball shirt I gave him yesterday. We drove in silence until the city melted into fields and narrow trails. It was beautiful, unsettlingly beautiful. Flowers everywhere, like someone had painted them on. Perfect rows, vibrant colors. The kind of scenery that doesn't look real unless you're dreaming or standing in front of a Photoshop brochure. We climbed a gentle slope toward a lookout. People walked around us, quiet and smiling, like nothing bad could ever happen in that place. For a second, I believed it. I breathed in the cold air and let the peace sink into me. My shoulders loosened. My thoughts went still. Then I blinked, and the world wasn't the same. The hill was gone. The gardens were gone. The sky, the people, everything disappeared. I stood in flat grassland swallowed by white mist. My body refused to move. My eyes locked forward. Trapped? Panic crawled inside my ribs, but didn't have anywhere to go. I breathed. I know I breathed, but I couldn't lift a finger. I don't think I was in control anymore. When I tried to move, it felt like I was waking up inside my own body for the first time, like I'd been tied down by chains I couldn't see. The harder I fought, the more I felt myself breaking through whatever held me still. That's when I noticed it. Something was coming toward me. It wasn't walking. It glided, not floating like someone tiptoeing in the dark, not creeping or sneaking. It moved as if the floor wasn't real, as if it didn't need the world the rest of us are stuck in. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. Every part of me screamed that if I didn't move right then, if I didn't tear myself out of whatever held me, something final would happen. Something I wouldn't come back from. It kept coming. Closer. Too close. Just a few feet away. No. 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 Stay away from me. I don't know how, but suddenly it was far ahead of me and I could move again. I ran. I ran like my life depended on it. And maybe it did, but that thing glided faster. It wasn't human. I could feel it. It felt like pure wrongness. Then it grabbed me. Everything went white. A voice screamed, not mine, "Stop him." I opened my eyes, and I was hanging off the edge of a lookout platform in the city. My hands locked in the grip of strangers trying to pull me back up. My body felt impossibly heavy, like gravity had singled me out. Dozens of people strained to pull me up, and still I barely moved. I looked down. Jeremy was clinging to my legs, shaking, desperate. And behind him, clinging to him, was it a dead weight dragging him downward. It crawled up his back like it had all the time in the world. No one else saw. I swear they didn't. A security guard grabbed my arm and tried to lift me. I rose inch by inch, and so did the thing. It climbed until its face hovered inches from mine. It smiled. Its fingers dug into my clothing like it was deciding who to take. I tried to scream Jeremy's name. I tried to warn him, but the demon wrapped its hand around his wrist, like claiming property. Jeremy didn't even react. One moment he was there. The next, his grip went slack, and he was gone. No scream, just the sound of a body hitting something far below. A dull, final impact. Everyone around me went silent, frozen, like they couldn't understand what they'd just witnessed. The demon vanished. I stared down at Jeremy's body as they pulled me back onto solid ground. Later, witnesses said they only saw me slip, dangling over the edge, terrified, and Jeremy trying to help. They didn't see the thing. They didn't feel it. They want answers. So do I. I drove away afterward. I couldn't bring myself to go to Jeremy's place. I didn't turn on music. I didn't think. I just drove in silence, trying not to feel the shape of its hand still on me. When I reached the highway, the radio flickered back on by itself. I shut it off. I couldn't listen. I stopped at a service area, the same one I'd visited the night before. Only this time, the souvenir shop wasn't there. The building just wasn't. Every other place was in the exact same spot. But the shop, gone like it never existed. I drove around looking for it. Nothing. No trace. No sign it had ever been real. I haven't found it since. Story 9. I was alone in a Smoky Mountains fire lookout. Something was practicing how to be human. I wasn't supposed to be out there alone. That's what the training officer told me. Anyway, when he handed me a laminated packet labeled Temporary Lookout, Dry Season Protocol, and slapped my shoulder like I'd just volunteered for something heroic. The Smokies were seeing their driest July in over a decade. Creeks pulled their ribs close and went quiet. Leaves crisped to the edges. Even the rocks felt warm to the touch if you sat with them past noon. We'd had 2 lightning spark spot fires already. Both killed quick by crews who humped hose up trail with that zero complaint look that comes from doing it too long. Camera is yours, he said. 2 weeks straight. You'll do fine. You hike to the Mount Camera lookout from Cosby. Low gap up to the AT and along Camera Ridge. A bright bone path laid on thin soil. Then a spur trail out to the stone octagon the CCC laid in the late 30s. The old guys like to talk about it. How they hauled sand by mule and water by hand. How the stones don't fit so much as interlock. How the windows look east like eyelids. How when it storms the place feels like a ship in a gray bottle. There's a USGS brass cap set in the rock a few yards south of the porch. Scratched with boot heels and weather. Stamped with the elevation. 4,928. Sharp enough to catch a glint at noon. On the climb, I passed a battered, low gap 2.9 placard. The one with a little bullet crease in the top right corner that everyone pretends not to notice. I met my relief at the Cosby campground ranger shed at dawn. He smelled like canvas and wood smoke, and somebody else's camp coffee. We checked the radio, dispatched repeaters, tone codes, loaded up a plastic tub with freeze-dried meals, and those 2-gallon water bladders you lash together like you're building a raft. I had a roll tent, even though the lookout has bunks. The training packet highlighted this. In case of window failure, use tent. In parentheses, birds. Someone had drawn a smiley face with devil horns next to it. Birds. My relief said. He looked past me toward the far line of trees, where the light comes late. That's what they write when they don't want to write. Wind throws logs. You'll be fine. I want to say I believed him. I want to say I wasn't already hearing things in the trees. Those soft positional sounds your brain assigns when you know you'll be alone later. A stepping sound you can count, a caught breath that isn't yours. But I was new. I was the extra body squeezed into a season with too few. So I said thanks, took the tub's rope handles in both hands, and went up. The climb to Low Gap is 3 notches of work. Sweat stung my eyes and carried Pine on its back. Every switchback came with cicada that cranked a winch, then fell silent like a hand over its mouth. When I hit the ridge, the wind had teeth again. Clouds pulled skeins across MT Sterling to the east. The trail burned bright with sun where the hemlocks had died. White snags pointing their regrets at the hot sky. I passed 2 southbound hikers who lifted 2 fingers without slowing. Their calves were the color of black tea. The lead one had a small bell on his hip that chimed with a joke of gentleness. At Camera, the stone lookout sat quiet and solid above the ridge, the way it always does. I shouldered in, propped the door with a boot wedge, and said a dumb hello to the empty. When you first walk into a lookout, there's always a pause where your brain expects someone to answer back. Some other ranger leaning on the Osborne firefinder, a coffee mug with lip marks, a map bristling with pins. This one had the finder centered, the glass cleaned so thoroughly you almost doubted it, the azimuth ring catching light. There was a composition book on the desk with a pencil stabbed through its spiral. A page lay open. June 28, clear. Smoke report false alarm fogged. Bear on ridge at dusk. He knows where you are before you know where he is. July 3rd. Lightning hit above Groundhog Creek. Crew knocked it down. Remember to hang your food stupidly high. We got a smart raccoon with opposable thumbs. July 9th. Heard the old stories again. The thing they like to call Wild Man. A joke until the laughing gets quiet. Below that, the page was torn. I set my food on a bunk. Hung my clothes from the rafters on a line. Taut line hitch. No. Is it taut? No. Taut line. Right, whatever. I tied it twice and put my spoon with the cook kit before I could lose it. Afternoon laid its length across the blue folded ridges while I ran my radio checks. Camera to Cosby, test 1. And camera to Foothills Repeater, test 2. That clunk and hiss that sounds like a wave hitting a dock. It comforted me, like pressing down on a bruise and feeling the hurt obey. And then I was in it, a job that is mostly watching. You walk the deck. You look at the edges of things. You learn to distinguish wood smoke from fog. Heat haze from a true column. Your eyes make circles, and the world you are responsible for lives and breathes in rings around you. Some people can't stand it. The quiet becomes audience. Every bird is judged. Every creak is a promise you don't think can be kept. Me, I've always liked the sense that if something goes wrong, I'm the first to say it out loud. I like being counted on. The first night, something tapped the western windows 3 times, slow, like knuckles on a table. I was lying on the bunk with the radio low, listening to Cosby check in with a trail crew scheduled to sleep at campsite 37. The tapping came with a smell I couldn't place at first, a wet feral breath that caught on the back of my tongue like ammonia and pennies. I sat up. The tapping stopped. I watched the window like it could blink. Bird. I told myself after a minute. Big, dumb grouse. But I hadn't seen a grouse at 49:28 in July. I stepped to the window and shined my headlamp. The beam bounced back old glass and the reflection of my own forehead sweat. Beyond that, the decking planks and the stone guard wall and the scrub of mountain laurel. And beyond that, the helter-skelter black of forest that understands all your shapes and wants nothing from them at all. I wrote the smell down in the log. There's a story in the Smokies you hear if you hang around the old radio guys and the Sawyers. It changes with the teller. Some use a whisper. Some use a laugh and never look you all the way in the eye when they do. It's a leftover from before anybody put numbers on hills. Before anybody nailed an oak blaze to a trunk and told that tree where the path goes. Hair and hands and a face like a man's, except worse, in some small way no one can name the same. Red eyes, some say. Yellow, say others. A sound like a barn door unpinning itself in a storm. It is a Tennessee wild man, and he doesn't belong to one county or one holler. He belongs to the moment you realize you can't tell if a step is two-legged or four, and your heart makes a hollow in your chest to hide in. The second day, I watched heat blur a creek valley until the laurel looked like it was seething. Dragonflies wrote bad words in the air and erased them again. I rotated the Osborne's reticle along the ring. Practice. Column at 110 degrees, one ridge beyond Snake, Denver. I wrote 100 in the log the first time and scratched it out. Nerves make liars out of numbers. It wasn't true, but it felt like rehearsal against the day it would be. Around noon, I heard rocks knock together below me, not the slide of one stone riding down a slope to rest against others. A clack, then space, then a second clack that echoed up my collar. I leaned over the east deck rail and held out my breath until it trembled. Whatever made the sound had patience. It waited until my eyes watered and my elbows hurt, and my brain began to tell me a story about nothing being wrong. Clack, clack, clack. I didn't say who's there because I am not stupid and because the words wouldn't have been for whoever made that sound. They would have been for me. When it stopped, the quiet that replaced it had weight. You know that quiet. It pulls on you like a thing with hands. I scanned the slope, black birch, dead hemlock anniversaries, the scrollwork of the trail where it curls around sandstone. Twice I had that old mischievous sight, where you think a gray trunk turns its head. 3 times I imagined dark hair where there was shadow. And once, just once, the shape of a shoulder sliding behind Laurel, as if it didn't mind being seen enough to hurry. I wrote that down too. The 3rd day, I found the spores. Down past the porch, where the stone meets soil, something had pressed the dirt into an idea of a foot. If I were telling this to you at a bar instead of writing it into a report I've edited 20 times, I'd cup my hands and say it like this, splayed wide, with the impression of a big toe that might not be a toe so much as a blunt wedge. The heel didn't end where I expected it to. It bled imperceptibly into the rest of the ground like weight does when it's careful. And there were more prints than one. One aimed toward the porch and stopped short of the stone. One moved along the edge and turned away. You learn quickly what a bear looks like when it puts its front feet down and then its hind feet into the same holes. You learn the signature of a deer's careful twist. This was neither. It was almost a person, except that my body rejected the idea, and I felt that small speed of sweat find the small of my back and sit there, unsure what to do next. I took a photo with my phone, and the glass made the dirt disobedient. It looked like nothing. I pressed my own boot alongside for scale. The print outpaced me by length and width. You'd need to be a linebacker with a history of turning over your ankles to make it. Back in the lookout, the composition book waited. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote slowly. July 12th, possible tracks below the east deck. Not bear, not cat, not human or not sober. Stone knocking at midday. Smell last night, ammonia/metal. I know the stories. I am not drunk. I almost added. And I am not trying to make friends in my own head. But the pencil looked dumb with that sentence, and the words felt too hard. That evening, Cosby radioed in a smoke report from a day hiker near Maddenbald. Called in as a high, thin column, not moving, and most likely someone's hot grill. Dispatch asked me to take a look. I stepped to the finder and spun the ring to the caller's bearing, then rotated back toward where the column would be if it were real. My finger walked the topo, ridge to ridge, there, faint as a breath over a bottle mouth, just the lightest tint in the air. If you've never done it, you don't know how your brain tries to excite itself into seeing smoke when there's only heat. But after a minute, the tint held steady. Narrow. True, I radioed. Camera to Cosby. Possible column due north-northeast, about 8 miles. One ridge past Snake Den, narrow white. Could be moisture. Copy, camera. Will ping Greenbrier. Copy, I said. I almost mentioned the rock clacks. I did not. While I watched the column, something moved in the foreground. It was nothing, then something, then nothing again. A shape in the shape of a man, half the slope closer than I wanted. It stood exactly as still as a person does when they know they will be seen if they rock forward. If a deer freezes, your eye reads like a piece of grammar in the sentence of the wood. If a person freezes, it will become stage. This fixed itself right at the border of those two ideas and refused to belong to either. I felt my throat remember how to close, and I said, without touching the radio, "You're too close to a federal structure, and the shape, if it had a head, turned it. There are distances in these mountains that have a moral to them. The space between you and a rattlesnake, for example, where the animal will be what it is, and you will not change that simply by wanting. The space between you." And a thing like this was not one of those. It wore motives. By the time I found the cheap bravado to lift my binoculars, it was gone. Only the laurel held the thought of its passage. Those leaves that bounce once and then, with great care, bounce again. The radio hiss. Greenbrier confirms column near brush pile on private land. Abetted. Good eyes, Kimmer. I said thank you and felt like a man doing ventriloquism with a full glass of water. That night, the stones came. Not pebbles. Stones. Some big enough to sound like they had stories in them. They hit the stone guard wall below the deck and sang with that ignoble note only struck objects can manage. One skittered across the deck plank and impacted the door with a thunk that shook the bolt. I turned off my light and stood with my hand on the radio as if it were a friend's shoulder. Outside, the wind didn't move. Cicadas quit. If I had stayed still, I think it might have ended differently. If I had simply been a piece of furniture in the lookout's memory, a man-shaped shadow that breathed within limits and chose to honor those limits like a good guest, maybe the thing would have tired. The thought would have evaporated, and I would be writing about the time kids got frisky on a ridge. But something in me, something that remembers being a boy in the dark woods with a stick you have decided as a sword, picked up the flashlight. It clicked in my hand, and threw a cone of weak yellow at the windows. I stepped to the door. "Don't," I whispered to myself. I opened it anyway. The smell made me step back against the table. I could taste it in my eyes. There's a stink the hog farms put up sometimes when the wind drives their belly toward town. There's a stink when the creek pulls back in August and leaves what was carrying. This was both and something sharper, like a jar left uncapped for years and shed. The deck lay empty, then not. It's a trick of old light. Your brain pulls a slow photograph in and says there's nothing, and then it adjusts and something is there after all. A forearm against stone, a trailing hand, hair matted with leaf chaff, arm-length wrong and muscular in ways that misnamed themselves in the eye. The hand. Okay, it was a hand. There is no other word that is fingers, curled against a stone rail. Toenails, not claws, clicking once as weight transferred. It moved without hurry and with purpose. And it looked, which is harder to describe than it sounds. There is looked at, and then there is looked into. I say it looked into because I could feel the idea of myself 10 paces behind me where my spine meets something that isn't bone, and it seemed to examine that instead of the meat, I haul around and move it from place to place. "Hey," I said, failing both of us. It withdrew the hand and gave me a sound that didn't carry. No grunt, no scream, more like a breath refusing to be born. The odor lifted and felt like an animal settling. I moved backward and closed the door slow, like you do with a sleeping child. I slept in the tent inside the lookout that night, the fly rattling against itself, the radio on my chest. Around 2, something walked the roof. 1 step, 2, 3, slow as if mono-footed. I held my breath until the tent swam and thought of the note in the packet. Birds. I tried to laugh. I let out a sound like a cough that someone had set down and forgotten where. The steps stopped. The wind came back like a promise not worth much. And I slept the way the body sleeps when it chooses you, a drop into something that has no temperature. On the 6th day, I made a mistake. It was small as mistakes go. It's the scale that matters. I hiked down the spur trail to the 8T to check the sign, where some overeager weekenders like to car hearts. I brought the tub's empty water bladders to refill at a seep we use when the mule train's late. It's a brown trickle this time of year, tucked under rhododendron, and a boulder with a face like a dead man's cheek. You lay the bladders flat, and you aim the trickle with a plastic bottle you cut in half, and tell yourself you aren't wasting an hour. I found the bladders moved when I came back up, just a little. The kind of little you could write off if you were in town at a picnic, and a gust came and you were telling a story you want to keep telling. But up there, where every mouthful of water is an act of faith and planning, you pay attention. Then I saw the line. It ran from the deck, across the bare spot where visitors stand take pictures, and down the start of the spur trail. It wasn't rope. It was bark. Someone, something, had stripped long skins from a poplar and braided them loosely, the way old men braid string when they explain knots to boys who aren't listening. The braid was hung in a lazy drape from laurel stems and pinned at intervals with sticks placed like picks for a guitar you do not know how to play. It formed a waist-high guide that split the air and tugged your eye along it, like a sentence your mind starts finishing without permission. I followed it 10 paces before I understood what I was doing. "No," I said out loud to a day without clouds. "No, sir." I cut the braid with my pocket knife and coiled it meanly and tossed it off the slope. The forest took it with a shrug. Back inside, my spoon was gone. I stared at the spot on the desk where I'd left it. The cook kit lid reflected my face back at me like a bad idea. It was just a spoon, steel with a bend in the neck, from some previous life. It was also the one piece of comfort I had been careful enough to control. I searched the obvious places, then the dumb ones, Then the places that made me mad at myself for even thinking of them. Nothing. I ate dinner with a tent steak, washed the steak in a guilty way, and put it next to the cook kit where the spoon had been, as if that could undo the part where I'd been played with. That evening, I heard a man speak below the deck. I couldn't make out words. I couldn't tell if it was English or another thing entirely. It rose and fell like a human voice rises and falls when it tells a story to itself to see how it sounds. I pressed my ear to the floorboards and felt the vibration come through bone. Not deep, not growled, thin, an idea of a voice. I waited for the shape of the sentence to present itself, and when it didn't, when the cadence stuttered and found itself again, and repeated a rise that felt memorized rather than understood, the kind of fear I associate with hospitals and sirens came to sit cross-legged behind my heart and put its hand in my chest cavity and wriggle its fingers around until I could taste brass. The voice stopped. The breath on the other side of the deck board did not. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the finder and traced azimuths with a dead radio in my lap. Dead because the battery had died and my spare had been left in the tub. And the tub was set just outside the door, and I could not open the door. Without doing something to myself I do not have a word for. There are things a person can do to prove to themselves they are still the owner of their body. You can clap, you can sing, you can slap the side of your own face. You can put your hand on your own sternum and push until you cough. I did none of these. I watched the ring spin under my finger and thought, absurdly, of how many men had laid hands on this glass circle before me. Eyes narrowed against smoke. Hearts beating with weather instead of whatever this was. At first light, I opened the door. The tub was upright. The rope handle had been retied. It was a knot I recognized because it was a knot I tie when I am in a hurry and think I will fix it later and then never do. It wasn't mine. It was mine badly attempted. 2 turns instead of 3. The difference had the taste of mockery. Down the slope, halfway into the laurel, hung the spoon. It had been threaded to bark braid I had cut and thrown, and it hung like a charm. A little sun laughing to itself when the wind found it. I had the thought, sharp and single, that if I stepped down there to get it, the laurel would close and the smell would open, and I would be in a different part of the story. I stayed where I was and let the spoon hang and felt like I had been asked a question I had failed even before I tried to answer. I made my call for relief at noon. It wasn't supposed to happen for another 4 days. There's a rhythm to these things, and you don't break it unless the break buys you something you can defend later. I used a professional voice. I kept my nouns clean. Camera to Cosby. Go ahead, camera. Requesting early relief. A small pause. Medical? I could hear the pen dispatch was already holding. Fatigue, I said. Hydration. Another lie prepared itself, lined up behind that one, and I didn't have to pull it because the pen noise changed. Copy. We'll send CRAW to the trailhead. ETA 1600. Your relief is Waller. Waller had a scar through his eyebrow that made him look like someone you shouldn't borrow from. He laughed like an old pot. He was superstitious in a way only a man who's been right about more than he can prove will be. I breathed out and felt my chest respond like a crate that's been untied. Copy, Cosby. I'll meet Waller at the spur sign. The thing below the lookout, the thing that could tie a knot if you gave it time and watched, made its first mistake then. Or maybe it didn't, and all of this is a drawn-out moment that began a long time ago with someone else's name, and I am only now catching up to it. It stepped out. Broad-chested the way a swimmer is. Hair a color that doesn't exist in the paint catalog because it keeps changing with the angle you look at it. Gray, then rust, then a color the hungry sun makes when it burns through smoke. It stood between the porch and the start of the spur, and it watched me with a face that was not a face only because I didn't want it to be. It had a brow and a jaw, and those were both wrong in small, exact ways that made my brain keep correcting, then stopping, then trying again. The eyes were dark as sugar water. The structures around them twitched as if they were learning. There's a moment they don't tell you about in the packet. A moment where your mouth wants to shape the word, sir, and your hands want to bring themselves up to show emptiness, and your legs want to fold. The animal in you shakes the keys it stole from all the buildings you keep locked inside. Something else in you checks the list of laws you know and starts crossing things off with a red pencil, because none of this is going to help. I lifted my hands. Okay, I said, I see you. The wild man, if that is what it was, and there are not better words and worse ones, just this one, tilted its head like a man pretending to be a dog for a child. The movement was rehearsed. It took a step. The print it left was as careful as a child's assignment in penmanship. It made a sound like a whisper being chewed. It raised its right hand and opened it, showing me a palm cross-hatched with old scars and new. And it laughed once, a bark that never found its own echo. The radio breathed. Cosby to Kemmer, Waller on the way. He's bringing extra water for you. The head turned toward the radio as if the words had a smell. I felt a stupidity then that I have replayed so many times my skull has divots in it where the replay wheels ride. I felt protective of the radio, of the finder, of the stone itself, and all those men in the 30s who placed these rocks like sentences you want to say correctly forever. I stepped forward, and the wild man flowed back a half step, and the relationship between us shifted from 2 points on a map to a line with tension in it. One more step, and I would be off the porch. One more after that, and I would be on the dirt. One more after that, and I would be in the story you tell only if you have nothing left to keep. The wild man made a sound then that lives under all other sounds I will hear until I die. It wasn't volume. It wasn't even threat. It was a correction. It told me, without words and with perfect clarity, that I had mistaken who was moving who. I stopped. The head turned again, slow, tasting the air for Waller maybe, or for the idea of Waller, or for the different flavor of a man who has seen enough he has stopped pretending he hasn't. I went back inside. I closed the door. I sat on the floor with my back to the wood, and my hands on my knees like a child told to breathe. Outside, the wild man walked the deck. The boards talked softly under its weight. It paused at the windows, each in turn, as if the lookout were a museum it had paid to enter and it would not be cheated. At the north window, it leaned close enough that I could hear its breath find the old caulking and turn it sweet and rotten. At the east window, it put something, forehead, softly to glass and rested it there for the count of 5. When the sound of it moved to the door, I put my hand flat against the wood and felt heat like a stove through winter gloves. It stood there a long minute, and then it did something that took parts of me I did not know you could take. It knocked 3 times, slow, a rhythm I knew from the first night, and which now changed permanently from question to certainty. Then it stepped away, and when it did, I heard stones clack once, twice, 3 times slow, and something the sound said wait. I waited. Waller called up the spur at 4:17 p.m. My watch said so. His voice carried like an easy promise. "Ho, Kemmer, you up?" "Yes," I said, and the word cracked in the middle like an egg. He came up with a grin and 2 red jugs, and a look that said I was not the first man to look like this. He set the jugs down, let out a breath through his nose, and turned his head in that birdish way he has. "You smell that?" he said. I said yes. He walked the deck slow. He bent once to look at the stone wall, then again to look at the print I hadn't known I had kept pristine. He ran a thumb along the window sash where something had left a fine brown smear that you could call sap if you want an easy afternoon. "How long?" he said. "Days," I said. He nodded as if he had just put down a heavy bucket. He walked to the finder and laid his palm gently on the glass ring. The touch was not superstitious exactly. It was respect shaped by years. "We're leaving on time," he said. "We won't do it in a hurry and we won't do it slow." He smiled without mirth. "And we won't look back unless we have to." He stepped to the door and then, God bless him, he opened it with the same easy motion he always uses, as if nothing in the world has changed, because if it has, you don't want to tell it that. We went down the spur, and the wild man came with us. Not on the trail, not in any way that would make a straightforward story. It stayed in the trees on the downhill side, and it moved parallel, a shade for each of us, its progress marked not by itself, but by what the forest did in its wake. A slow bounce of laurel leaves, a bird lifting and refusing to call, a dry rattle of something that might be bones strung on bark if you believed you were going to die, and needed the world to be dramatic about it. Twice I made the mistake of trying to place it exactly, and twice Waller touched my shoulder. That tap-tap a coach uses. Don't reach for the ball when you should be moving your feet. At the 80 junction, he stopped and looked at the sign like it might say something new if he looked kindly enough. Then he turned downhill toward Low Gap with cheerfulness he did not feel, and I followed. And the wild man, who does not care about signs except the ones it makes, went with us. When we reached the first switchback cut into the slope where the bench is wide enough for 3 men to walk abreast, we heard rocks move in the gully below. Not tumble place, a cairn made with care. Waller did not look. He said, instead, a sentence that I have thought a lot about since, and which has nothing in it except what it says. We're not the first to go down while something comes along. He meant in history. He meant in afternoons. He meant in the lives you live in your head when the body is busy. At the last 100 yard before Low Gap, where you begin to hear human voices again, children's complaint and a dog scold and the slap of someone's palm on a truck bed. The smell lifted, as if a line had been crossed. The hill behind us held its breath and then let it out, and with it went a pressure I hadn't known was riding my sinuses. My body did the thing it does after a fever breaks. It discovered thirst with an anger that was almost joy at the truck. Waller slung the water into bed and handed me a bottle. "Don't tell them," he said, nodding toward the campground, meaning the families and men in their hats who say "sir" to us with a practiced drawl. "Tell me, tell the radio, tell the book. That way it's true without being useful to folks who will only want the part where it has teeth." I told him, in fewer words than this, in the truck, while the air conditioner made a sound like the old bluegill pond in my grandfather's place when you toss feed, and the fish all rose at once, greedy and flat. We drove to the shed. He signed me out. He said I'd done fine. He meant it. He walked me to my car, because he knows about doors and how they feel after you've been looked at through one. At home, days later, I unpacked slow. The world had edges again. The shower made the good sound when it hits the back of your neck, and you put your hand against the tile and remember that you used to believe in walls. I emptied the plastic tub onto my kitchen table. The tub's rope handles still wore that 2-turn knot. The tent stake was in there too. It still smelled faintly like scorched ramen water from the night. I played it off as a spoon. When I reached the cook kit, I found my spoon. It had fused to the bottom of the pot. I must have kicked into the fire my first night. No, my second, and fished it out and set it down and planned to scrub it proper, and then forgot like boys forget to write their grandmothers, and then convinced myself it had been taken to make the story better. The steel had gone dull and blued, and then welded itself within aluminum like a silver leaf pressed to a cheap coin. I held in a light and laughed once and felt tears rise, and then I laughed again because that was the correct response, ridiculous as it was, on the back of the composition book, because I brought it home without asking, and Waller rolled his eyes and said, "Just bring it back next run." I wrote this, because the brain likes to have forms, and I am no different. July 21st, relief complete. Possible wildman encounter. Rock knocks. Smell, tracks. Vocalization mimicry. Structure, deck contact. Window contact. Visual at 27 meters. Daylight, no precip. The object demonstrated curiosity. Patience, a sense of rehearsal. No overt aggression, unless you call being rearranged aggression, which I do. It was nearly midnight when I finished. I turned off the kitchen light and went to my small bedroom and lay on sheets that smelled like the detergent aisle at the store where the checker says, "You take care now," in a way that makes you believe her. The street outside my window had one working lamp, and it painted a single blade of brightness across my closet door. I counted my breaths to 13 and backed down, something an old SAR guy taught me when the questions won't stop asking. At 1:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. I didn't pick it up. No good thing calls at 1:13. It buzzed again at 1:14, a little longer, like a friend tried to decide if they should insist. I let it go. In the morning, I listened to the voicemails. The first was static with words in it, if you're the kind of person who finds faces in wood grain. The second was a breathed talking sound, the intake that precedes speech and never finds it. The third was stones. 3 clacks. Slow. I could have deleted it. Instead, I saved it, and I have listened to it enough now that I can tell myself I hear laurel leaves move after the second clack, and that is either true or it is a mercy I give myself. I went back, because that is what the job asks, and because some part of me that is older than I am didn't want to finish in the middle of the sentence. The second hitch was rain slick and tamer. The air smelled washed. Camera felt like a ship in a bottle again. I set my things down. I straightened the finder. I checked the deck for prints and for the line of bark that might be strung to lead me where I shouldn't go, and for the smell that now divides my life into before and after. Nothing in the notebook. Waller had left a note in his half-print. July 27th, fog thick as milk. Saw nothing, heard less. You're okay up here. He knows your name now. Don't let that sentence trick you. W. That night, I slept in the bunk and not in the tent. Rain ticked the glass windows in the rhythm of a clock that never has to be wound. The wind came up at 2, and I woke and lay with my hands crossed over my chest like a boy at church. I listened. I waited for a step, a breath, a clack. What I got was silence broken once by a whip poor will and the long sigh of a tree, deciding to give up on a limb it had been pretending wasn't dead. I went back to sleep with a smile I did not own. In the morning, on the east deck, pinned under a small rock with care, lay my spoon, separated from the pot. Clean, a bend in its neck where it had always had a bend, testimony to the fact of itself. It caught the sun and flashed the way metal does when it means to tell you it can still choose who to give your face back to. I stood there with the rain gutters chiming and the smell of wet stone and the old fall leaves in a world that had discovered law again. I put the spoon inside the cook kit and closed the lid and set it on the table. I put my hand on the finder. I breathed. I did my job. Sometimes after, late at night in my apartment, there's a sound at the edge of hearing, a roll of something small across something big, an insect caught in a sill, a neighbor's late plate set onto a counter with care. It is nothing. It is not a message. It is the world being itself while I am myself inside it. But sometimes, not often, just enough, I will put the phone in my ear and play those 3 clacks in the dark, and I will think about the way the bark braid pulled at the air, in system I follow, and I will hold the knowledge that I did not follow the way you hold a rail in a stairwell after nearly falling. And then I will sleep. He is out there still. Male or not, he is simply a convenience, a word with a handle. He is out there when the stone's warm and cool, when the laurel drops its old leaves, when the CCC's careful work interlocks dampen a fog, so thick you can chew it. He is not a bear. He is not a man. He is something that wants you to know it could be both in the places the map is thin, and when the ridge burns again, and it will, because the sky believes in matches. He will stand where smoke makes the same column as a lie, and he will watch. He will wait, and if you knock, he will answer 3 times, slow, with patience it took him the long way to earn. Story 10. I saw it on a military base. I wish this could be a boring story, one that you skim over, shrug off, and forget. Hell, I wish I could forget. Some backstory might help you understand. I don't even know if anyone will read this. I just need to get out of my head. One thing I should start with. I don't believe in the paranormal, the creepy, the ghosts and ghouls. There was always an explanation for me. That little brown creature that looked like a mangled dog, it was a weird dog, obviously. Doors opening on their own, a simple draft. Warm air entering cold air, or whatever scientific thing it is. Seeing something out the corner of my eye, only see nothing when I look. I just need more sleep. An entity that lurks inside the closets of my childhood home, causing nightmares? Just the imagination of a kid. My family always thought differently. My mother and sister would always burn sage whenever they got the creepy feeling. It was just a coincidence that I felt better, too. I don't think my father ever believed it either. But now I'm not sure. He was always calm whenever my sister or mother spoke about their experiences. He never brushed it off. He listened. He asked questions, but he never seemed scared. More like he was trying to gather information. He always seemed relaxed whenever they finished their talks. My father was in the Air Force for 20 years, and honestly, I'm not sure how he did it that I've only been in for 3, and I'm more than ready to leave. That's probably due to bad leadership and low manning. I'm not willing to stay any longer to find out. I think that's enough backstory. My job in the Air Force doesn't matter. Not for the story anyway that I was working nights, an amazing schedule of 2000 to 0600, which means I got out at 6 in the morning. It was a Sunday, quiet and dark, the type of silence that reminds me of my tinnitus. The sun never comes up earlier than 8 these days. My gas tank was nearly empty, which was odd. I remember thinking I had just refilled it. Either way, I needed gas. I drove to the gas station on base, just down the road from where I worked. I didn't pass any cars, which wasn't odd. Who would be out that early in the morning on a Sunday? The first thing I noticed after leaving my car was a silence. No animal sounds, no birds, no cars, not even wind. There was only the creaking of the gas handle as I grabbed it. The creepy feeling, as my sister Mother would call it, was looming over me. I looked around as I tapped my car to pay and noticed that the sign for the gas prices was out. I'd never seen it off before, but maybe I was overthinking it, a coincidence. I shrugged it off and started pumping my gas, still scanning my surroundings. The eerie feeling never left. It was cold, even with my fleece on. I could see my breath. When I exhaled, I looked beyond the parking lot toward the Chopette, and then I saw it. I won't lie. For a second, I swear my heart stopped. It was a humanoid figure. I thought it was another airman getting off work. It wasn't impossible. I wasn't the only one on shift work. But the more I stared, the more I realized something was off. The neck was too long. The arms reached farther down than they should. Little things you'd miss with a quick glance. I looked away quickly when the figure whipped its head around at me. If that was a person, I didn't want to be caught staring. Maybe it was just someone with weird proportions. Calling them weird would be rude, but it was a better alternative to something not human, which I totally didn't believe in. I remember looking at the gas pump and thinking how it was taking forever. I only needed 10 gallons. Why was this taking so long? Then I saw something move out of the corner of my eye, a flash of motion that I glanced back to where I last saw the figure and froze. It wasn't there. Even though it was below freezing, I was sweating. My armpits, my forehead, down my back. Maybe I hadn't seen the figure the first time. Maybe I was seeing things. I didn't need more sleep. I stopped pumping the gas at that point. I could get more when it was daylight, when there was noise outside, when there wasn't a humanoid thing on base. Trust me, I tried to rationalize it in my head. Homeless people got on base all the time. Maybe it was just a fast homeless guy with odd proportions. Who am I to judge? I turned to get in my car and froze again. How much am I freezing tonight? Too much for someone who claims not to believe in this kind of thing. But this time, I couldn't come up with an excuse for my soul. The thing was staring at me from behind the pump to my right. This time I could get a better look at it. Since it was in the light and we were both standing so still, it definitely wasn't a homeless person. It was tall, at least 7 feet. I hadn't realized that when it was farther away. It had human eyes, but they were sunken in and yellowish, like someone with jaundice. There was something else about them too, like it was looking past me but staring right into me at the same time. It's hard to explain. I noticed the uniform next. The thing was dressed in BDUs, the Air Force uniform used from the early 80s to the 2010s. I only knew that because my dad wore it. Sure, it's not impossible to get BDUs these days, but the full uniform? Really? It didn't fit either. The collar hung loose on the long, thin neck. The arms stretched too far past the cuffs. I wasn't sure about the pants or boots. I was too afraid to look down. I had my hand on the car door handle. I wanted nothing more than just open it and drive away. But I was frozen in place. I couldn't tell if my heart was beating 1,000,000 times a minute or not at all. Everything was so quiet, it was deafening. My tinnitus was almost comforting. The thing swayed. It looked like it was going to move forward, and I yelped. Its skin was loose, and it looked like something gray underneath. Maybe not gray, more like off-white. The realization hit me, and I really wish it hadn't. The thing was wearing skin. It was trying to look human. It seemed startled by my yelp, and I don't know if that helped me or not. Either way, I flung the door open, jumped inside, and sped off. I ignored the seatbelt alarm. I just want to get out of there. My car doesn't automatically lock right away, so when I heard the terrible sound of my back passenger door opening, I didn't want to look back. I didn't want to validate the thing that was now in my back seat. But I did. I looked back and saw how truly terrible this thing was. The smell was almost overwhelming. It hit my nose like a slap in the face. The skin was almost melting off its core like it was rotting. It smelled like it too. I didn't freeze this time. I grabbed my lunch bag from the passenger seat and started beating the thing. I was speeding down the road, at least 50 in a 35, beating this horrid, uniformed, skin-stealing thing out of my car. I'm not religious, but I thank God it worked. The thing fell out of my car, still clutching my lunch bag. I'll have to buy the same kind again, in case I ever need to beat something out of my car. I didn't look back. I didn't slow down. The car door shut on its own. Maybe not all the way, but enough. When I finally got to the gate to leave, I slowed down. I considered telling the gate guards what happened, or maybe just saying some homeless guy had wandered on base. The gate guard shack was empty. The gate was open. No SCCFO in sight. That sent chills down my spine. Were they already dealing with the thing? Had it gotten to them already? It would have switched skins then, right? I didn't know, but I wasn't sticking around to find out. I drove home, blasting my Spotify playlist the entire time. I was shaking. I was scared, but I didn't want to acknowledge that. I almost didn't want to leave my car. I checked all my mirrors as I parked, afraid to see that thing nearby. But I didn't. So I got out, ran to my door, managed not to drop my keys as I unlocked it, and I rushed inside and locked the door, releasing a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Never have I felt so thankful to see my boyfriend up early, looking at me with confusion from the kitchen. "Rough night at work?" he asked. "I wish," I replied. I didn't waste any time explaining what had happened, ranting as I shed my uniform. "You're kidding. You're serious? I thought you didn't believe in the supernatural." "I didn't, babe. Not until just now. You don't have to believe me. But that's what happened." I was a little offended that he didn't believe me, until I realized I probably wouldn't have believed myself either. He was quiet for a minute, watching his breakfast burrito heat up in the pan. I was quiet with him, processing what I'd just gone through. When he finally spoke again, I startled. "You said your car door shut, right? But not all the way." The question sent a chill down my spine. That much was true. Someone or something could easily get into my car. That door wouldn't have locked. We both stared at each other for a second before racing to the gaming room. We could see my car from that window. At first, I didn't see anything. I let out a breath and looked at my boyfriend with some relief, but he was still staring, frozen. That I looked back at my car and saw what he was looking at. There was a thing, sitting in the back seat of my car, waiting. I wasn't sure how it had followed me, or how it got there so fast. I didn't want to think about it. "I think I believe in the supernatural now," my boyfriend mumbled, still frozen beside me. "See? I told you," I said, feeling weak. But at least I wasn't alone this time. "What should we do? Call someone? Kill it?" he asked, still staring. I was going to answer, though now I couldn't tell you what I would have said. Before I could get a word out, the thing started moving. It slowly got out of the car. Somehow that was almost funny. This tall, lanky thing crawling out of the back seat of my tiny Honda Civic. IT stood there, staring at us for too long, before shuffling away. We both stayed at the window, even after it was gone. "Isn't your burrito going to burn?" I finally asked. "Ah, shit," he muttered, lingering by the window for a second longer before running back to the kitchen. I never burn sage like my sister and mother. I don't ask questions like my dad. But I do check my back seats. I think I understand now why he never looked scared. Maybe my dad believes in the paranormal after all. He just isn't afraid of doors closing on their own, because he's seen worse.